book list littered with AI slop, fake books by long-dead or non-existent authors. We'll open up phone and text lines for your thoughts on AI, how you use it, how you parse fact from fiction, if you even bother to.
I'm Marjorie Egan, and then it's GBH News Executive Arts Editor Jared Bowen with the latest in arts and culture, from shows at the Huntington, exhibits at the ICA, and Boston's new public art organization, the Public Art Triennial, which kicks off tomorrow. Plus, it's time at the New England Aquarium with retired penguins. It's a place for us, Jim, after all. It's all next in the first hour of Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH, live from the Boston Public Library.
Support for NPR comes from NPR.
Live from NPR News in Washington, I'm Corva Coleman. The Justice Department has announced it's dropping lawsuits against police departments in Louisville, Kentucky, and Minneapolis, Minnesota. The agency says the Biden administration imposed consent decrees on these departments that were unjustified. The Biden administration took that action after former police officers in Minnesota murdered George Floyd. South African President Cyril Ramaphosa will meet President Trump for talks at the White House later today, amid deteriorating ties between the countries. Kate Bartlett reports from Johannesburg. South Africa says billionaire Elon Musk will also join this meeting.
D-Day in D.C. was the headline in one local newspaper today. South Africans are watching anxiously as Cyril Ramaphosa meets President Trump, worried it could be a repeat of the Oval Office showdown earlier this year with Ukrainian leader Zelensky. Trump has repeatedly attacked South Africa, falsely accusing Ramaphosa's government of taking land from white farmers. But Ramaphosa was upbeat speaking to reporters in Washington on Tuesday, saying the talks will focus on trade. He is also expected to speak to Trump's South African-born advisor, Elon Musk, about bringing his Starlink satellite service to the country. For NPR News, I'm Kate Bartlett in Johannesburg.
President Trump's cost-cutting entity, Doge, has slashed tens of thousands of federal jobs at agencies. NPR's Stephen Fowler reports a new analysis by NPR shows Doge has recently sought cuts in at least 40 agencies and groups.
There are more than a dozen lawsuits that have been filed related to Doge efforts at these small organizations that say it's not legal. By and large, these are places that have been created by Congress, many of them nonprofits, and nearly all of them do have their funding and functions spelled out by law, and some of those cases explicitly limiting the president's power to interact with them. That means President Trump can't always go in and fire people and make changes on his own.
NPR's Stephen Fowler reporting. For the first time in 50 years, emergency room doctors will have a new framework to assess people with head injuries. From member station KQED, April Dembosky reports on the system outlined in the journal Lancet Neurology.
Current assessment of traumatic brain injury filters patients into 3 categories: mild, moderate, or severe. UC San Francisco neurosurgeon Jeff Manley says that's way too vague. He's seen severe patients taken off life support who could have recovered, and mild patients sent home with nothing.
6 weeks later, they've got pounding headaches. They've got problems with their visual system. They're not sleeping well. So there's nothing mild about that.
The new framework recommends using blood tests, CT scans, and patient medical history to make diagnosis more detailed and precise. For NPR News, I'm April Dembosky in San Francisco.
On Wall Street, the Dow Jones Industrials are down 350 points. It's NPR.
Good morning. With the latest from the GBH Newsroom, I'm Henry Santoro. An outside audit of Brookline Public Schools has found that administrators mismanaged school finances, ultimately contributing to the district's budget crisis. We have more from GBH Radio's Diane Adame.
Rising salaries and special education costs combined with mismanagement left administrators scrambling to maintain school services, according to the audit. It also found that some special education service providers failed to undergo criminal background checks. The district is facing as much as an $8 million deficit for next year's budget, and Town Administrator Charles Carey says the fact that revenues are not keeping pace means some hard decisions lie ahead.
And this report puts those hard decisions squarely on Brookline's shoulders, and now we have to take the next several months and work together and figure out how are we going to solve for this problem so that we stabilize our schools and our community going forward.
The Brookline School Committee will discuss the audit at its meeting this week. Diana Dame, GBH News.
The city of Worcester is adding security guards and security cameras on its first floor. Mass Live reports that Worcester City Manager Eric Batista made the announcement yesterday that beginning May 27th, security guards and scanners will be present at City Hall whenever the building is open to the public. In sports, Red Sox Mets wrap up their series tonight at Fenway. In the forecast, we've got clouds, low 50s today. Clouds, maybe a little shower or two overnight tonight, low in the upper 40s. And then that nor'easter arrives tomorrow. Forecasters say we are looking at high winds and inches of rain. This is GBH News.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include Eric and Wendy Schmidt through the Schmidt Family Foundation, working toward a healthy, resilient, secure world for all. On the web at theschmidt.org. This is NPR.
Eastern Brownie, I am Marjorie Egan. Welcome to Boston Public Radio 89.7 GBH. We are broadcasting live. Thank you from the Boston Public Library and streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. At noontime, Doris Kearns Goodwin is going to join us. We're very excited about talking to her. They're going to make a movie out of her love story about her and her late husband, Dick Goodwin. And from 1 to 2 today, the Attorney General, Andrea Cabral, is going to be with us. You can come here and ask her questions in person, or you can text us or call us. She's going to be here from 1 to 2, and the Mayor of Boston, Michelle Wu, is going to be here with us May 28th. We're back here on Friday. Hello, Jim.
Hey there. Before we start, I want to recognize two of our terrifically talented former colleagues when we were in commercial radio. Lori Grandy, who is still on BZ Radio, and Carolyn Cruz. Let's hear it for both of them.
It's great to see you guys.
They came up to say hello before. I had no idea who either of them was, by the way. No idea.
Not true.
They showed me their ID, and then right away I remembered.
You know, some people think we're a little low road here now, Jim.
Oh, my God.
Those were the days when we were really, really low road.
Yeah. No, really who we were, I believe is the expression. Yeah. So I want to read more this summer, I said to Marjorie, and I read about some fabulous books in the Philadelphia Inquirer, Marjorie, which is my hometown paper, the Inquirer, not the Enquirer. And the other day, here are the books: Tidewater Dreams by Isabel Allende, which sounds fabulous, and The Last Algorithm by Andy Weir. They really look terrific. This is where you're supposed to say something, by the way.
Yeah, what was the problem, though? There was a little problem, correct?
Neither of the books are real. Neither are real. The authors are, the books aren't. So it's obviously getting harder and harder to tell fact from fiction online, where the internet is basically all satire, TikToks, AI-generated content. So give us, real human beings for now, a call or a text at 877-301-8970. Let's talk about it. The ease of access to generative AI like ChatGPT has meant more than Trump posting a photo of himself as the Pope. It also means some people applying for jobs have gotten to the phone interview. This is apparently true. The phone interview portion of the application process, only to find out they're chatting with the AI bot. In politics, the potential and the reality with deep fakes and other is a nightmare. And as Marjorie knows, this is really sad. The only thing I really care about are those cute cat videos where you really don't know if those are even real. God, I hope they are.
It's taken the fun out of it, though, right? If you don't know if they're real.
So in any case, we want to know how you're handling the prevalence of all this slop on the internet. It's the Wild West out there, no regulation, tons of bad actors. How do you tell you're living in reality? And how are you using generative AI in your everyday life, your work? If you're a young person, are you cheating in school like we hear tons of young people, college students, high school students are doing? Give us a buzz, 877-301-8970 to call or text.
You know, the AI-generated stories you talked about, the Philadelphia Inquirer, the Chicago Sun-Times, it talked about how we've turned into a hammock culture in America, and I thought, we have. I know we've turned into a hammock culture in America. You don't know if that's true or if that's made up too. And how about these interviews? Going for a job interview? We have a little sound of this 25-year-old guy named Leo Humphreys. He posted this TikTok of his own experience with an AI interviewer on his account. Leo humps a lot. He claims that this is absolutely real. Here it is.
Hello.
Hi. Thank you so much for joining the interview today. I am so excited to talk to you and get to know more about you. For our first question, let's circle back. Tell me about a time when. Let's circle back. Tell me about a time when. Let's circle back. Tell me about a time when. Let's.
I think the internet's breaking up or something.
Yeah. Apparently, he says he didn't even know that it wasn't an internet problem, but an AI kind of thing.
How would
Okay,
you
enough for
feel
her.
if you went for a job interview and you were interviewed by not only one that didn't work, but this fake AI thing? That would
It'd be
really
a little bit depressing.
It would be very depressing.
Can I tell you something? I have to say, I'm ahead of the curve on nothing.
Yeah.
With one exception. Do you remember years ago when the deep fake of Nancy Pelosi speaking, and they slowed it down to make her seem like she was drunk? And I said on this very radio show, this is the future in politics. You're going to have no idea what's real, what's an illusion. And, maybe it's mundane. But by the way, I hope people know I wasn't making up the book thing that I was doing.
No,
with
it's
Marjorie.
true. It's
At
true.
the beginning, there were books that didn't exist. There were authors that hadn't written the books that were real. And there were authors that didn't even exist. And it was only after the fact when the guy who put together the thing, who apologized and said, I'm always supposed to double check, I didn't double check, which means to me he never double checks. He just got caught in this particular instance. There's no real ultimate harm there, but there is potential for great harm. Did you read the story? There was a huge
About the
story in the New York...
Northeastern kid?
No, we'll get to him in a second. You can get to him in a second.
Yeah.
There's a long story in the New York Times the other day about cheating in colleges.
Oh, yeah.
And the paragraph that just put me over the edge is this ethics professor is talking about all the kids in his ethics class cheating, including on the one paragraph they're supposed to write at the beginning, saying why they decided to take the course. He said 90% of them were AI generated. I mean, it's rather frightening, is it not?
No, it is really frightening. And this so-called Big Beautiful Bill, which is not really very beautiful when you look at the details of it. I was stunned to learn via Heather Cox Richardson, the BC historian, that in that bill is prohibitions on any state regulating AI for 10 years. So you can just imagine how things will turn out if no one is able to regulate this for 10 years.
That'll be Trump's fourth term in 10 years, by the way. 877-301-8970. By the way, if you want to tell us great stories about how you've used AI, Jamie does, you do some some AI generated. You do.
Yes.
By the way, but do you deceive people when you do it? Obviously he does, yeah. But in any case, but he doesn't mean to deceive people, so that's fine.
Listen to this. While I appreciate AI in the medical field, says the texter, I'm constantly fact-checking my MAGA aunt on Facebook with all the fake posts that she shares. So they're all over the place. I mean, and it's going to be, you think it's hard now for people to differentiate between what's true and what's false. I mean, I think we're in big trouble, Jim. Big trouble.
And by the way, I assume people know that wire services, theoretically for inconsequential things like high school sports and that sort of stuff, all that stuff is AI generated these days. Obviously, it matters to the high school kid or the parents or the friends or the whatever, but not as serious as in politics or real life, I would argue. 877-301-8970 is our number. You can call or text with your own experiences, good or bad.
Listen to this. AI online job interviews are the norm now. My 24-year-old daughter and her friends get them all the time. They know what to do. Use keywords for the job listing. Don't blink too much because AI measures how nervous you are by counting your blinks, his mother says. Oi!
By the way, anonymous texter said, Jim, it's called A1, not AI. Get it right. Who's the person who did A1? Was it Linda McMahon, the Secretary of Education?
Yeah. It was
the
Linda
other day.
McMahon. Yeah.
Well, that's really heartening. The Secretary of Education called it A1. Can we get that sound, by the way? That'll make me smile in a couple of seconds.
She's always steak sauce.
Let's start with Melissa in Cambridge. Melissa, welcome to the show. How are you?
Hi, thanks, Jim. I wrote about this just last week in a Substack.
Can I say your last name or no? Can I say it?
Yeah.
Melissa Lutke.
Oh, Melissa Lutke. Great to talk to you,
Melissa. How are you?
And tell people the title of your book about being a young...
My book is, thank you, Marjorie.
Yeah.
My book is Locker Room Talk, A Woman's Struggle to Get Inside.
Yeah.
So, I just wrote a chapter for a book that another journalist is writing this week, which was really about my life as a fact checker. Mm-hmm. And that's how I started my journalism career. And I wrote about an incident where I did everything right in the story, but I literally overlooked the fact in the portrait, the picture that was painted by the artist, that he put an extra man on the field at the end of a game, in a football game. And I was put on probation for it, almost lost my job. So fact-checking is something in facts matter. But let me just speak to what I said in the Substack last week.
Please,
and that is that besides errors and facts, what are we going to be left with as human beings if we can turn over to a machine to just write what we feel, write what we think we know, write our papers for us? Where is the sense of struggling to accomplish something and feeling at the end of it a sense of satisfaction?
Gone. I can answer that. Where it is gone. I mean, Melissa, you are totally right. We'll check out your Substack, and your book is spectacular, and it's great to hear from you. No, you're wonderful. Melissa, thank you yet again. Check her out.
What Melissa said is really important, though. When you think about, you need to kind of stretch the brain, to kind of exercise it, to really concentrate,
obviously,
to achieve really good things. And if that's gone, I mean, it's like now people talking about their ability to concentrate has been diminished by constant social media and interruptions and that kind of stuff. So it's not good.
By the way, we should say, if it wasn't clear, because I think we rushed her about her book, Melissa's book she was the first woman sports reporter, had to sue to get into a Major League Baseball locker room.
Yeah.
And it's a great story.
With the Yankees, I think, wasn't it, that she had to get in there?
Not sure. By the way, here is a secretary you can be proud of. We'll talk about other secretaries later in the show. Here is Linda McMahon from the World Wrestling, whatever it is. I think she was testifying in front of Congress when she talked about A1. Here she is.
That there is a school system that's going to start making sure that first graders or even pre-Ks have A1 teaching every year, starting that far down in the grades. And
and by the way, they're going to get a small fillet at the beginning of the day, and they can just pour it right on there.
And by the way, one thing about fact checking, this is why I go so crazy that Facebook and all these places just run these lies all the time, and there's so many lies, and Fox News tells lies, and they get away with it and stuff. Because you did have to, newspapers had an excuse kind of for daily deadline if you were reasonable about fact checking ahead of your deadline. But if you worked for a magazine, which I did for several years, or anything that you had a little bit more time, what you had to do is you had to hand all your notes and your finished product over to fact checkers, and they double check. Was it the corner of Boylston and Exeter Street, and what was the number there? Was that actually the Back Bay of Boston? So things were factual, and it's just gone. It's just kind of gone. It's not gone in print, but tragically, it's certainly gone in social media.
So we have a couple of good anonymous texts. Jim, don't worry, your job is safe. AI is too polite to imitate you.
That's
Thank
a good
you.
one.
An anonymous texter, I knew you'd like that. I don't know if this is true. I made $806,000 last year using AI to create a day trading algorithm, spent an average of 12 minutes a day to maintain and use. Who knows? Michelle in Arlington, you're next on Boston Public Radio. Welcome to the show.
$6K?
That's what he said, or
wow.
he or she said. Yeah. Hi, Michelle.
Hi. First time caller.
Thank you.
All the things.
We loved all the things. Go ahead. What's up, Michelle?
So I was born before the internet, was in schools, and now I'm a perimenopausal woman with a kid in puberty.
Mm-hmm.
So when I get overwhelmed and I have too many things I need to do, I will use ChatGPT and say, I need to get my kid from soccer, I need to make dinner, I need to finish some work stuff, and I want to have time myself. What should I do next? And it will create a schedule for me, and it's kind of nice. Or I'll say, this is what I have for dinner, what can I make? And I guess it's quicker than checking the internet.
How often do you follow the lead, Michelle? How often do you follow the lead?
Sadly, very often.
Well, it's not sad.
But that's,
I don't think it's sad.
I think that's a useful application.
You could use it, actually.
I could use it, yeah.
Where are my keys?
I'm always in
exactly
trying to decide what to do first. You make your list, you do A, B, and C, but then you ignore it. If I had instructions from ChatGPT, maybe I'd follow them.
What did you say, Michelle?
It's super supportive. It's almost a yes person, which is good and bad. It's like, you're doing great. You're a good mom. So sadly, it's replacing a supportive husband. But I don't know. I love mine. So
Michelle, that was an excellent first call, I should say. Make one again
Michelle's got
soon,
a good
please.
point. If you had, instructions from ChatGPT, maybe you could, eliminate the husband altogether in certain circumstances.
Well, beyond the husband thing for a second, she said she had a good one. I don't know if she meant a good ChatGPT or a good husband. But, you are, this, don't take offense, people
it's okay.
listening.
I know I'm
Marjorie's the most
pathologically
disorganized person
I know.
who has ever lived.
Yeah.
You are a perfect example of what Michelle's talking about.
I'm going to go home this
How
afternoon.
useful would that be for you?
I'm going to start ChatGPTing this afternoon, and hopefully I'm going to be a different person.
And she's going to say, Jim, I can't find my computer. Do you know where I left my computer? What's my password? Who am I, and why am I here?
I'm finally good at organizing the password front.
Yeah, I'm sure you have.
Yeah, I did. I did.
Doubt that.
Okay, we have some, our staff put together some of our bloopers. I don't know if we actually said these or if they made them up. This is supposedly some AI-generated audio of you and me, Jim.
Okay.
And they claim it's authentic, or I don't know if it's AI, whatever it is.
Just play the damn thing.
Okay, it's, we would never actually say these things, I don't think, on the air. Here it is.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Jim Browdy and Marjorie, and I have the hiccups, so if that happens, it happens.
I always love people that prance around naked on television.
How sad was it when you had to bid adieu to the kumquats?
I was a nervous wreck.
I was a little round mound of sound because I drank Pepsi.
I like it from my neck down to the bottom of my butt. That's what I would like. I'm sort of out of it now in a general kind of way.
I was a round mound of sound because I drank Pepsi. So what was the point of that
exactly? We said those things.
In any case, Melissa in Newbury, neither are we, so don't worry about it. Melissa, welcome to the show. Thanks for calling. Hi.
Hi. Good morning. Yes, sorry, still recovering from that myself. So I called in. I do not disagree with any of the potential issues that you guys were all talking about. However, I just started my own business about 6 months ago, making healthy snacks. I founded it with my husband, who is also working full-time, but mostly working on this by myself. And I have to say, ChatGPT has been one of the best and most supportive coworkers I've ever had.
How?
Really?
I use
How
ChatGPT,
specifically?
Yeah, pretty much every day. So I have a food business. So number one, there's a lot of regulation I need to follow. I'm constantly asking questions. I do fact check everything that they say, and I've really learned, you need to push on them. They'll say something ridiculous, and it's like, well, what do you think about that? Why do you think that? The other thing I'm working on right now is packaging to go into grocery stores, and I've actually shared a couple of different versions of it to help me figure out, what do you like? Come back and forth. But I would say, I'm 35 years old, and I've got a lot of education and experience under my belt, and it's that's really helpful, and the balance with all this that I think our education system really needs to figure out, because I have the ability to think on my own and push back that I hope, my 3 kids will learn in school amidst the world of AI. But it's really, exactly figuring out that balance of how can we do. And I think NPR actually had a great story last night on All Things Considered about the Miami school district and how they're doing that. So
we missed it. We'll check it out. Hey, Melissa, what's the name of your business? If you want to share it, we're happy to promote it for you.
Yeah, thank you. It's called Unrefined Foods. I actually deliver locally. I'm driving around today making deliveries. So you can go to unrefinedfoods.com. And otherwise listen to you guys a lot.
We love that. We'll check it out. Melissa, good luck. Thanks for the call. Appreciate it.
I mean, there are a million good uses for it. It's just, I think it's kind of one of those things, like I said before, that we don't want to make its own rules and any kind of regulation.
I'm totally confident Congress will step in and make sure that it's under wraps, don't you think?
Well, not this Congress.
Not any Congress. We've said this 1,000 times. Zuckerberg is testifying in front of the Senate about 5 or 6 years ago. He's on a committee. What was the guy who died? He's from Utah. Orrin Hatch.
Orrin Hatch.
He's on the committee. And in the middle of Zuckerberg's testimony, Hatch interrupts and he says, Mr. Zuckerberg, it's a free site, meaning Facebook. How do you make money? And there's a long pause, and Zuckerberg says, ads, Senator?
I know.
So I don't think they're quite ready. By the way, this is from the Washington Post this morning, or I think yesterday. This is a quote, the headline. AI is more persuasive than a human in a debate, study finds. And here's the subheading of the piece. When provided basic demographic information on their opponents, AI chatbots adapted their arguments and became more persuasive than humans in online debates. I mean, that's a little troubling, no?
Okay, well, that is a little troubling, but listen to this. See what you think about this. This is from a texter.
Yeah.
I enjoy sending birthday cards and postcards to friends and relatives. I use ChatGPT to create poems about the recipients, and they love them.
Do you think that's okay? If you tell the person that it was AI, right?
Yeah, because if it was a ChatGPT deal that was creating the poem, it wouldn't mean as much, right?
I think that's probably true.
Yeah.
I mean, other than the fact you thought to write them, you didn't write them, you just sent them, if you know what I mean. Mike in the car, welcome to the show. Hi.
Hey, Jim. Hey, Marjorie.
Hi.
Hi.
You're
hey,
on.
So, yeah, thanks for taking my call.
Sure.
I'd like to just briefly say that the ChatGPT helped me recently get over the immediate loss of my wife of 25 years.
Oh.
How so?
Well, first thing it told me was that I can stop bracing. Bracing for chemo appointments, or bracing for the next shoe to fall, or bracing for the worst news ever. And it helped me sort of get started unraveling. It's definitely not a substitute for a person and a real therapist, but at the time I wasn't seeing anybody and I wasn't able to procure an appointment right away. So I used it for work. I had used it professionally to look up facts and stuff like that. So I had a subscription. And when I asked it about, grieving and learning about the loss of a significant spouse, my spouse, it kind of helped me graduate my thinking and the raw emotions. It asked questions. It wrote letters. It tried to help me live in the moment and be present. And because we have kids, young adult kids, my oldest is a freshman in college, just to put it in perspective. But for the older kids that don't live at home anymore, it's kind of a wash for me. But for the younger person in my household, it has given me some direction on how his grief might go and what his support kind needs. And he does see a therapist, but it gives me an idea of how to communicate with him properly.
That's a hell of a story.
We're up against the clock, Mike, but I just want to ask you, so obviously it was able to give you emotional, psychological support, yes?
I would say that's correct.
Yep, okay. Okay.
When you're grieving hard after a loss, anything that's nice to you is relatively pleasant. So
anything.
Mike,
that was incredible,
yeah,
Mike. Thank you for your
Mike,
call.
I'm only moving on
really
because we're up
it.
against the clock, but that was a great
Thank
call.
You. That was great.
Thank you very, very much. Stick around. You're listening to BPR live from the library, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. We're talking about ChatGPT.
European leaders gave Russia an ultimatum: agree to a ceasefire or face new sanctions. The deadline for that ultimatum is now passed and Europe is pressing ahead. But will more pressure work?
What happens with sanctions is that over time, people find workarounds.
That's next time on The World.
This afternoon at 3, here on GBH News 89.7.
Our programs are made possible thanks to you. And Boston Ballet, presenting Spring Experience, a program that showcases the range and beauty of ballet today, featuring works by Mikko Niisanen and Jiri Killian, now through May 25th at Citizens Opera House. Tickets at bostonballet.org. And the Boston Speakers Series, announcing its upcoming season at Symphony Hall for 7 evenings, featuring Dr. Anthony Fauci, Ken Burns, Outliers author Malcolm Gladwell, and freed Russian political prisoner Vladimir Kara-Murza. bostonspeakers.org.
Welcome back to BPR. Marjorie Egan, Jim Browdy, live at the library, streaming youtube.com/GBH News. Doris Kearns Goodwin will be with us at the library at noon to talk about her new docuseries with Kevin Costner called The West, a bunch of other things, and obviously about 4 months of Donald Trump. So the following script was generated by ChatGPT. This is true, by the way. Who gave it the prompt? You? Zoe. Zoe gave the following prompt. Write me a radio script for a morning news show about artificial intelligence being riddled with false information prompting listeners to call in. Here's what it spit out. This morning, we're diving into a topic that's quickly becoming one of the biggest challenges of the digital age: artificial intelligence and false information. From chatbots that confidently share fake historical events to AI-generated news articles riddled with inaccuracies, it's becoming harder than ever to separate fact from fiction in the age of machine learning. Here's where it gets really concerning. These tools are being used by students to write essays, by businesses to generate content, and in some cases, even by journalists to draft early versions of stories. If the information they're drawing from is flawed or worse, fabricated, it's not just a tech issue, it becomes a trust issue. Have you ever caught AI spreading total nonsense? Do you use AI in your daily life, or are you steering clear because you don't trust it? Call us right now at 877-301-8097. That was really pretty good.
It was pretty good.
It was pretty good.
But it's crazy to think that there's not really useful ways this can change your life and improve your life, like the mom that called about making her schedule, or somebody else is like, we were talking this morning about writing emails. I mean, if you've got a bunch of emails to write, you don't need to make them very personal or emotional or close. But the gentleman that just called about losing his wife talked about getting, like I said, emotional
That's a leap, though, I'll tell you.
Psychological support.
I know.
It's weird on one hand, but it's not weird on the other hand. He couldn't get a therapist. This is a way to deal with these things. And it's like these people talking about having, in some ways, it's similar to people having robots in their life, which seems weird. But if you are someone who's,
lonely,
immobilized, or you're in a nursing home, or, so it depends a lot on your situation.
So we just read, Zoe did the prompt, and then ChatGPT or whatever it was wrote this fabulous intro. Zoe, and we can't deal with this till 2:00, Zoe. Zoe just sent us a note. I'll accept my severance package as a lump sum. Thank you very much for the job. That's fine. She's here till 2, so it's not that harsh at all. 877-301-8970.
Isabel in Boston, thank you for calling.
Bolton.
In Bolton, sorry.
Hi, Isabel.
Hello.
Hi.
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 So I was just wanted to tell a story about how I was a writing tutor in Baltimore in like a college.
Oh, great.
And I had a day where over Zoom, I had a kid in a clearly AI-generated paper. I asked him to rewrite a single line in front of me because it's one of the ways I can prove if it's his voice or if it's the computer's voice. He highlighted it, he clicked cut, and then he put his cursor back in the same place and he clicked paste.
That is on. So what'd you say?
I asked him, I told him, I can see your screen, so I can see that you just clicked paste. So you want to explain that? And he said, I wrote it in my notes app, and then I put it in there, and then I was like, okay, buddy, I just need you to know that even though you only shared this window with me in Zoom, I can see you have ChatGPT open in a different tab.
That is fabulous.
Oh, gosh.
So how much, Isabel, as a writing tutor, what's the prevalence of this?
I often get kids to come to me and they don't want their papers edited. They want their papers to sound less like their AI.
Wow.
And sometimes they're outright about that, and that's almost more alarming.
Isabel, thanks for the call. That's a great one. Thanks so much.
Did we mention the Northeastern kid who
No,
noticed?
you started to.
Yeah,
You should
I started
tell the story.
This is a woman named Ella Stapleton. She's in the business school at Northeastern, and she noticed that her assignment notes from her professor appeared to include direct queries from a conversation with ChatGPT, things like distorted images and misspelled text. She filed a formal complaint with Northeastern's business school, citing the undisclosed use of AI, as well as other issues she had with this particular teacher, and asked for reimbursement of $8,000 for that class. So
it was denied, by the way.
It was yes, it was denied.
By the way, do you not agree that if it's not disclosed and you're paying for something that you're not getting, even if it's high quality AI, that you're not getting what you bought? There's got to be transparency, right?
Yeah, I think that would be, when you talked about the ethics class, I mean, that seems to be part of the ethical perspective, right? I think so. Is to say this is AI generated or something. I mean, I don't know if
because you may say you don't want but that kid may have said, I don't want this class, if that's the case.
Right, but again, it depends. So if you're answering a bunch of rote emails for something that's just some silly thing at work, I don't think you just close there, do you?
I think you should.
Susan in everything?
I do. Susan in Westboro, we got a minute. It's all yours. Go.
Hi, thank you.
Sure.
First-time caller.
Thanks.
I was speaking with a select board member, and he was using ChatGPT to kind of argue his point. And I happen just to know the statute off the top of my head, and it wasn't correct. But if you didn't really know it, you would never know.
That is horrible.
So
what,
he's
what
talking.
happened?
We're using chat. GPT?
Responding to Susan's
in writing.
Yeah. And so what did you do about it?
Well, we were sitting next to each other. He had his phone there and was showing me what he had on ChatGPT, so I could see what he had. But I gave him the statute, and then he went back and looked it up later, and responded to that. But it's really easy to go wrong.
Why don't you vote for the bot in the next election rather than him? Thought about that? Susan, thank you.
I'll give it a consideration.
Thanks much for the call. Can we agree before we finish this on this transparent? You may be right. On mundane things, maybe it's not necessary, but the default should be that it is necessary, right? And you make exceptions rather than the reverse. No?
The default should be that it is
There's
necessary.
disclosure.
Oh, disclosure, yes. Generally speaking, yes. But I think on little mundane things or little notes or something like that. Of course, the question is, why would you even need it on little notes? You should be able to manage that yourself, I guess.
Well, I told you in that ethics class, it was New York Times. The thing was, tell me your personal reasons for taking this course. And the professor said virtually every one of them was AI or A1 generated, according to Linda McMahon. Okay.
Coming up next, GBH Executive Arts Editor Jared Bowen. He's going to tell us about life in the retirement home for the New England Aquarium's penguins. And drag is back at Trump's-run Kennedy Center. What? He's going to tell us up next on Boston Public Radio, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News and broadcasting from the Boston Public Library.
I'm Jared Bowen. Coming up on The Culture Show, filmed almost entirely on Martha's Vineyard. Jaws, not to mention its legacy and lore, are large in these parts. Although there are no giant Jaws-like sharks terrorizing the vineyard, Dr. Greg Skomel says human interactions with sharks will become more common. He joins us to talk about our relationship with the apex predators and how the film Jaws inspired him. That and more on The Culture Show today at 2 on 89.7 GBH.
Support for GBH comes from you. And the Boston Public Art Triennial, a citywide exhibition of new public art on view across Boston from May 22nd to October 31st, with over 100 events, performances, and programs open to the public. More at thetriennial.org. And the Museum of Printing in Haverhill, preserving the history of graphic communication from typewriters and presses to computers and copiers. Their expanded exhibit of rare and historic Bibles is now on view. More at museumofprinting.org.
Welcome back to BPR. Jim Browdy, Marjorie Egan, live at the library, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. Doris Kearns Goodwin joins us in exactly 30 minutes. Talk about a new docuseries she's doing with Kevin Costner called The West, about the filming of her beautiful book about her husband and politics in the 60s. About 4 months of Donald Trump. The Attorney General will be here, speaking of Trump, talking about Trump and other things, from 1 to 2 to take your questions. We're joined now live at the library by a human. That would be Jared Bowen. He is GBH's Executive Arts Editor, host of The Culture Show. It airs daily, right after us at 2 o'clock on 89.7 GBH. Hello, Jared.
Good morning. Great
How
to be
are
with
you?
Hi, Jared. So we've talked to you a lot about parts of collections in museums like the Metropolitan Museum of Art that have been looted from other countries and taken from them. But Jim pointed out to me, and this did seem a lot of people, 17 attorneys in the Manhattan DA's office, 17. This is all they do? So this must be a huge problem, or that's an awful waste of money.
Well, no, it's a very big problem, and I think that office alone has recovered about 2,300 antiquities and repatriated them to the tune of about $250 million in value when you're talking about objects that have gone back. And part of this comes through figures who have spent a lot of time in the Middle East. There was The Thieves of Baghdad, a book that was written by one man who now works in the district attorney's office. So these are people who are very familiar with this. Then, of course, you're in a place like New York where there are so many galleries, so many museums. So it's a hotspot for where a lot of these antiquities have ended up. But the reason we're talking about this is because 3 more just went back. 3 more pieces that were at the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York. 1 vessel, 2 ceramic sculptures dating back to 2000 BC that they ultimately ascertained were looted out of Iraq and through the hands of dealers and galleries eventually ended up in the Met, and now they're going back. But this is, we keep seeing this more and more, but I think the great thing that we can also point out is that often in these arrangements, there is an arrangement. There was some art that just went back to Yemen. But Yemen said the museum can actually keep it in this case for as long as it would like, so that you still have the objects on view here. They've struck the same arrangements with countries like India, Thailand, and Nigeria. So if it's done above board and there are negotiations with these countries, everybody kind of wins at the end of the day.
Well, except if, and that was a perfect segue to what I wanted to talk about, let's assume, for argument's sake, the museum in question acted in total good faith, bought the piece from John Doe, and spent, I don't know, $50 million for it. It turns out it was stolen and it has to be returned, and the country of origin says, I'm not interested in having you have it. So they agreed to return it. Are they screwed, essentially?
They are, but it doesn't usually work out that way. Usually it's gifted by a collector or a dealer, and so the museum hasn't necessarily bought it. So
but
yes,
the guy
they're
in this
still
case,
out
these
of the
Iraq
collection.
things, there was a middle person who was selling this stuff, right?
Exactly. So this is what we've talked about this before. This comes down to as much a moral issue as it is anything else, because you often have people who thought that they were buying something outright because maybe they bought it 20 or 30 years ago before the record keeping was such that they could understand that no, this was actually looted, this was taken from a country or it came from a battlefield or something like that. And then they have to decide, well, yeah, I spent $20 million on this, but I have to eat it because I now have the proof in front of me that I shouldn't own this. And it's always a question of ownership about something that's 2,000 years old anyway, and you're only on the planet for maybe 70 or 80 years if you're lucky.
So I just don't understand this. I hope I'm not the only one. When they discover these things at the Manhattan DA's office, is it the taxpayers of New York that are footing all these bills for returning these things, or how,
and who pays for the DA?
Well, the DA obviously is the taxpayers, but I mean, these things that are worth millions of dollars. If you paid, explain the money. You said some of these things are worth like $200 million. That's one you just said. The guy paid $20 million. What happens to that money, and who's
They're
paying?
out. They're out. So it's not the taxpayer. It's not like, okay, well, I own something that I paid $15 million for at auction or at a gallery. Now I'm sending it back to X country. It's not like somebody steps forward and says, okay, well, here's your $15 million. A lot of people just have to let that go. And I don't know if they write it off.
Unless if this middle guy, like in the story in the New York Times about the Iraqi things, is purposely engaging in fraud and knows it, I assume they could bring an action against him. I don't know if he's got the money, but if it's all good faith, it's the museum.
But just one last thing about this. So there's packaging involved and all these delicacies involved with these fine.
Each one is separate because, in some cases you have the museum, which has a great relationship. Like our museum here, the Museum of Fine Arts, has a great relationship with Italy, and so they've been able to strike a deal in those cases so that you can do this. By the way, a little update for you both, because we've talked about it's either called the Parthenon marbles or the Elgin marbles that are in the British Museum, but now Greece wants them back because we know that they were looted years ago. But George Clooney and Amal Clooney have stepped forward in the last couple of weeks saying they will definitely go back. And I didn't realize that his wife, Amal Clooney, we know that she's a very acclaimed lawyer, she has been working on the repatriation of those marbles. And so he's brought this to the fore. He first talked about it when he did that movie Monuments Men. So he's reminding the international public that those marbles or the friezes belong back in Greece, where they were taken from so many years ago, and where they have a place waiting for them in the Parthenon Museum.
So we've
spoken
Museum a lot about the, for lack of a better word, the transition at the Kennedy Center since Donald Trump became the chair of the board and whatever. But the good news, well, the bad news is bad news and good news. The bad news is they are homophobic. The good news is they're also incompetent. Because here is one of the shows that the Kennedy Center just announced in its new season. A lot of Broadway shows. One of them is Mrs. Doubtfire. Here's the cast performing the song. I'm sure it's one of Trump's favorites, Make Me a Woman. Here it is. So there are a ton of drag show moments in the stuff that's on the next season. And one of the things that Trump is obsessed with, as you know, are drag shows. So obviously they have no idea what they're doing. Is that a safe assumption?
We knew this was going to happen. So yeah, so they banned the Pride events, they've banned drag events, and then they outline the season, and it's filled with Chicago, where you have a man dressed as a woman. You have Moulin Rouge, where you definitely have a man dressed as a woman, not to mention any number of simulated sex acts that are happening as you walk into the theater. Then you have Mrs. Doubtfire, and you have Spamalot, where you have men dressed as women. I was wondering what they were going to do whenever they stage Shakespeare, which you frequently have men dressed as women or women dressed as men, because of course it's always cross lovers. So
Trump said Shakespeare is overrated.
That's true. So that was never going to merit anyway. But this is also, Trump was just saying recently that they're returning family-friendly theater and entertainment to the Kennedy Center. But then you have things like Moulin Rouge. I'm not casting any aspersions. I thought it was a fabulous show. It launched right here at the Colonial Theater. It's a spectacular show. It is a spectacular show. Spamalot, hugely fun. Chicago, not necessarily intended for children. So we have drag back on the stage. We have not family-friendly theater back on the stage. And this is all as they're trying to also turn our eyes away again, because everything is about diversion, by saying that the finances now need to be investigated at the Kennedy Center.
Can I, before we get to you visiting a senior housing for penguins, which is an incredible story. We had Kamau Bell on the other day, and he was one of the people who was scheduled to perform at the Kennedy Center and did. And he explained, I thought, quite powerfully why he thought it was the right idea. I can't remember which side. We've had this debate. Which side? I'm not on that side. Which side are you on?
I think it's important that when you have a venue like this that represents arts in this country, which the Kennedy Center does, so many people have proclaimed it as the preeminent art center in this country, because I think it's based in Washington, because it was the government coming together through multiple administrations to execute this, to make sure that we were elevating the arts, starting with President Kennedy through Johnson and beyond, that people do not abdicate the stage. And so if they have the opportunity to take the stage, they do it. I just had the band members from Guster on the show the other day. They took the stage because they also wanted to make a point. So they performed, and they also brought the cast of Finn on with them. Finn is the children's show where you have a shark who decides the shark wants to be a fish. So for that reason alone, this children's show was scuttled when it was supposed to go out on a 2-year tour. This is a children's show that was profitable. Theater isn't always profitable. In fact, it's usually a money-losing proposition, yet we still make it happen. But because it was about a shark who wanted to be a fish, they canceled it. So Guster brought them on the stage, so they used that platform.
Love that. Yeah, that was a great segment.
Okay, so what's with you and the old age penguins? This is one of the best. I didn't know anything about this till this morning. It is fabulous.
This is incredible because the New England Aquarium is really pioneering this. So, long story short, the African penguin, usually out in the wild, lives for about 10 to 15 years. Here we see what the penguins look like.
There you
pictures.
are.
That's
Look
great.
at Jared in his wetsuit.
Well, you're looking pretty fine
looking
there, Jared. Let me tell you. Go ahead. So's the penguin, by the way.
So the African, and look how sweet they are. If you're looking, this is one of the penguins who is quite old, who's about 30-something years old, and I was sort of preening his feathers, and then he was trying to preen me. That's what he's doing with his beak in my palm there. They're adorable. But where I'm sitting is the geriatric island for penguins at the New England Aquarium, because they typically live to only about 10 or 15 years in the wild, more susceptible to predators. But at the New England Aquarium, these penguins are now living upwards of 30-plus years. So they have recognized that because they have so many penguins, like real life, The older penguins probably need something a little quieter, something a little bit more situated away from everyone else. They get acupuncture. They get acupuncture. They get glaucoma treatment. They have special flooring on that island.
Ramps?
You just saw. They haven't. Well, yeah.
They're going to
the
build
ramps
the
are less elevated. They're thinking about doing even more ramps, but they have bumblefoot because walking on those little happy feet for 30 years, they become a little more tender.
Oh my God.
They've created this whole experience for them so they can live a very comfortable life.
So when you go into the aquarium, and that's one of the first things you see is all the penguins.
Yeah.
So are they next to that, or are they're next to it?
Yeah, so you walk right in the front door, and actually it's the door you walk in, it's the first island that you see is the geriatric penguin island. And then all of the young ne'er-do-wells are over to the left. So I had this great fortune this week of getting into that tank with them and wading over to the geriatric tank. And the other really fascinating thing about this is they have completely changed their behavior protocol at the New England Aquarium. I actually went in the tank years ago when March of the Penguins came out, and we were only in the water for about 10 minutes. Now it's very different because they have purposefully increased the interaction between the caregivers and the animals so that they are more comfortable when they need to do acupuncture or they need to do a health checkup where they check their heart and lungs and wings and feet. I saw all of this happen too. And it was actually a little bit for their science that I came in with Howard Powell, our longtime videographer, so that they could get used to somebody else being there, and they have that great curiosity about, well, what's this camera that's suddenly here and who's this other person, and it gets them acclimated so that when they bring on new team members, it's not so strange to them.
You know, in the spirit of transparency, we should say, which we weren't going to say, when our contracts expire, Marjorie and I are moving in, actually, which is we're really looking forward to.
They actually set up a little radio studio for you there.
Exactly. It's a remote broadcast. Before we go away, I hope this is on YouTube and we're going to be able to see it.
As soon as we turn the piece around and put it on the air in YouTube, it'll be up.
Oh, tell us and we'll let people know. So I am dying to see this play at the Huntington, Light in the Piazza. What'd you think?
It is beautiful. I loved this production so much. This is where everything comes together really, really well. So this is the Tony Award-winning musical, now staged by the Huntington Theater through June 15th. And it sets us down in Florence. It's the summer of 1953. This is based on a novella by Elizabeth Spencer. And we find a woman who has been married for many years, old enough to have a daughter who was in her 20s, traveling to Italy for the first time since her honeymoon. She's only with her daughter. Her husband is back at home. They're from North Carolina. And this is about different stages of life. So here she is in Italy looking at herself, looking at her own relationship with her husband, maybe quite nostalgic for the past, while she's with her young daughter, who is in this wondrous city in Europe and finding love for the first time. And you see the mother looking at her daughter falling in love, again, around all this beauty. And the light in the piazza refers to that ever-changing light in these Italian cities. And so you're ever-changing in your life and your personality and love because it's always evolving. It never stays the same. It can be beautiful, it can be dark, and it can be difficult. And so this is a beautiful musical. The music is gorgeously sung, beautifully acted. This is directed by Loretta Greco, who is the artistic director at the Huntington, and it all comes together so powerfully and so well.
June 15th, it's there till it sounds absolutely spectacular. We're talking to Jared Bowen, a penguin whisperer. Okay. You know, we're only going to have time to do one thing, and these two things are open to the full. Do you want to do today Boston Public Art Triennial or the Doors thing at the ICA, and we'll do the other one next week?
Well, the Boston Public Art Triennial goes longer, and I'll have a chance to see more of the work, so let's talk about Doors.
Do it. This tell us about the fabulous. Doors. Yeah.
So people might remember The Clock, which is a 24-hour film by Christian Marclay, who is an artist who created a 24-hour film where every minute of the day corresponds to an element of film that he found and has all been edited together. We've had it here in Boston, and they've had special 24-hour showings so that you can go at 3 o'clock in the morning and watch this. And it's a huge favorite among just everybody who sees it. It's a classic. So Christian Marclay has now presented Doors, which is on view at the ICA. This is its U.S. premiere. earlier, and he takes sort of the same mentality. He has mined films to have all of these scenes of people coming in and out of doors. I know it sounds kind of basic, and how could you be captivated by this?
Great,
but it's fascinating. So let me actually read you a little bit of what he has said about this. Doors are fascinating objects, rich with symbolism. They can hide or reveal, express opposites of light or dark, exterior or interior, open or closed. And so he edits them all together so that you have silent films, you have foreign films, you have blockbusters, and you see people constantly going in and out. But you realize what doors represent. They can represent everything that Christian Marclay, I just read, that they can be foreboding, they can be access, they can be something, a portal to another opportunity or person or realm. And so he matches tone, he matches emotion, he matches speed, and it becomes very, very absorbing. I sat and watched for about 45 minutes because it is just very engrossing, especially when you think everything that doors can represent in life.
Does this do nothing for you? You don't seem that.
No,
I'm totally into it.
It does, because you're sitting there watching a film in front of you, and it's all these different scenes of doors opening and closing. Yeah, I can see where you could get very into it.
But he does something really clever, too, and I got a little confused. So I'm sitting there watching, and then I think I saw John Travolta, probably from Saturday Night Fever, for the second time, and I thought, okay, I must have seen the entire film now, and I started to get up to leave, and I realized that, no, the film was starting in a different way, but that same scene was almost interjected to give you a sense of confusion, too, because if you're going in and out of doors and there is this frenzy, you're a little alarmed by what could be beyond that. So he plays with you, too, as the artist in doing this.
I'm sorry to do this.
Yeah,
this
what are you guys doing?
No, I'm not. This is
like being in class.
I want to be clear.
When the kids at the back of the class are passing notes, which is actually what Jim and Jamie are doing right now.
That's right. And it is. Yeah. It is not my idea, so don't be critical of me for bringing this up. Who brought this up? You? It was Jamie. Okay. So we're in New Hampshire for the primary, and one of the great moments ever. And we have this beautiful studio. I think Azita pulled it together. It was really fabulous. And it's all glass. And I'm motioning to Marjorie, whoever the hell our guest was, is sitting there waiting. Of course, Marjorie's wandering around the lobby of the hotel, the Radisson, whatever it's called. Yeah. And I say, come on like this. And she starts moving quickly, to her credit, walks right into the glass wall. And she bounced back in a way that was quite lovely.
They took 17 pictures of it and they posted it online, and there I was banging into the door over and over again.
No, you were not. If you banged into the door, excuse me, there was no door. That was the point.
It's a glass door.
No, it was not.
Yes, it was.
The door was like 15 feet away.
What are you talking about?
You banged into the wall.
It was a glass wall.
We interrupted my segment for this.
We did.
That's right.
We did.
And we didn't hear about the Boston.
No, we're doing that next time.
I know, but we could have talked about it.
No, because we want to talk. What do penguins smell like? Can we talk about that for a second?
You can go into my car and smell right now, because I had to wear a bathing suit, obviously, underneath my wetsuit, and I threw it into the back of my car and forgot about it until last night, and my car still smells like penguin this morning.
So what are they, seaweedy, the oceany, or what are they?
Well, let me just say they eat a lot. This is also interesting. They will also stop when they're finished eating. They're not like a dog that will just keep eating and eating and eating, but because they do eat a lot, only when they need it, they also poop a lot. So that kind of gives you a sense of what it smells like in there.
Can I ask one last
that's too bad.
Stupid question, I think? Is the reason they're able to live so much longer in captivity is because there aren't predators? Is that so obvious? I guess that's
it is,
pathetically
but
obvious.
Also, and this is the sad part of this, but this is why aquariums are important, the food supply is diminishing because of climate change. And so
they're starving.
Where the African penguins typically live, South African whatnot, exactly, they're starving. So they're fully endangered
like the polar
species
bears.
now. Yeah.
Oh, wow. God.
Did you have to have stitches when you went into the glass door?
No, everybody just sat there and laughed, and we filmed it, and so we could watch it like 50 times.
No, we actually we didn't only film it, we recreated it. Because Marjorie is such a good sport.
That's right.
So she walked, this is a true story, she walked in the glass wall like 20 times.
That's
so
right,
we got
20
it right.
times.
And but the original was real, is that correct?
The original was real, the glass door. Like it was like a bird, that flies into the windows.
It was like a bird.
And the poor birds don't survive. Thank God I have one of those big, hard Irish heads, so I was able to bounce off without any damage done.
I don't know if we need to go that far into it, but it's a true story. And
okay.
So you're going to come back. Cameron, you come back later and tell us what's going on. Yeah. Okay, fine.
Okay, Jared Bowen.
I cannot wait. By the way, I bet that penguin video has got to go up as soon as possible.
Yeah, that was great. You look adorable.
And good for the aquarium. That is brilliant. Just fabulous. And I was going to say humane, but you don't use that word when
it's very thoughtful.
Yeah, it's redone a lot of areas now, right?
They can eat early. They have knitting lessons and all sorts
That's
of
right.
Bird special.
They play pickleball.
Literally.
And Mondays and Fridays.
We'll talk to you later. Jared Bowen, thank you so much.
Okay, bye.
Okay.
Bye.
We have been speaking with Jared Bowen, GBH Executive Arts Editor, host of The Culture Show, which airs every day at 2 o'clock right after us. Coming up after the new news, presidential historian Doris Kearns Goodwin live at the library. She's going to talk about her new History Channel docuseries with Kevin Costner and about the fact that the love story of her life with Dick Goodwin, her late husband, is going to be made into a movie. We'll find out who's going to play Doris in the movie. You're listening to Boston Public Radio 89.7 GBH, live from the Boston Public Library and streaming at youtube.com/GBH News.
It's not over yet. More smart conversation about community issues up ahead with Jim Braude and Marjorie Egan on Boston Public Radio, right after a news update from NPR. Stay with us here on GBH 89.7.
Funding for our programs comes from you and MIT Federal Credit Union, helping members navigate their earning options with high-yield savings accounts. Membership information at mitfcu.org. Federally insured by NCUA. After two mismatched detectives are partnered up, they realize the only thing they have in common is the uncanny ability to solve murders. Don't miss McDonald and Dodds tonight at 9 on GBH 44.
You're listening to 89.7 WGBH HD1 Boston. Online at gbhnews.org. GBH News. What matters to you?
I'm Jim Braude, head on Hour 2 of BPR, live from the Boston Public Library. First up this hour, it's historian and best-selling author Doris Kearns Goodwin. She's about to launch a new 8-part documentary series on the History Channel about the American West with Kevin Costner. We'll also talk to her about 120 days of Donald Trump.
I'm Marjorie Egan. Then it's our monthly transit panel with former Assistant Transportation Secretary Chris Dempsey and longtime chair of the legislature's Joint Committee on Transportation, Bill Straus. Plus, two more things. Confused Trump administration officials edition. That's all next in the second hour of Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH, live from the Boston Public Library.
Live from NPR News in Washington, I'm Lakshmi Singh. Freedom Caucus Chairman Andy Harris says there is no way President Trump's massive budget bill passes the House today. He told Newsmax this morning, quote, "This bill actually got worse overnight." He and fellow conservative Congressman Chip Roy are demanding more spending cuts to keep the debt from spiraling higher.
We as members are at the table. We don't want the deal to be ended. This is an arbitrary deadline. If today comes and goes, it doesn't mean that this possibility to make sure that taxes stay low and that we fix America's healthcare system and fix America's energy system, it doesn't mean that prospect is off the table.
The Congressional Budget Office recently issued an analysis that projects President Trump's tax policies will add $3.8 trillion to the national debt. Secretary of State Marco Rubio is back on Capitol Hill facing questions about budget cuts and the dismantlement of the U.S. Agency for International Development. And he's getting a lot of pushback from Democrats. More from NPR's Michelle Kellerman.
The ranking Democrat on the House Foreign Affairs Committee says this is not the Rubio he once knew as a longtime Florida senator who often talked about democracy and human rights.
Secretary Rubio is doing precisely what Senator Rubio feared: withholding congressional appropriated funds, stonewalling oversight, and acting as if laws passed by this body are optional.
Rubio is defending his record, saying he's reviewed all aid to make sure it aligns with the Trump administration's America First policy. He says he's folding what remains of USAID into the State Department. Michelle Kellerman, NPR News, the State Department.
The Federal Emergency Management Agency is on the ground in St. Louis to survey tornado damage. St. Louis Public Radio's Hiba Ahmed reports city officials have shared more details about last Friday's storm.
St. Louis Mayor Kara Spencer said the tornado siren system failed to warn residents to take shelter.
There was a failure, a human failure, a failure in protocol to get the sirens up and running, to let the community know that there was a massive weather event hitting our community.
The tornado, which had wind speeds of up to 150 miles per hour and stretched at least a mile wide, tore through residential areas, leaving homes and local businesses in rubble. Missouri Governor Mike Kehoe says after FEMA completes its survey, he will ask for a major disaster declaration from President Donald Trump, which would open up federal assistance. For NPR News, I'm Hiba Ahmed in St. Louis.
U.S. stocks are mixed this hour. The Dow Jones Industrial Average down 335 points, more than 0.75% at 42,341. The S&P is down 8 points. The Nasdaq has risen 79 points. From Washington, this is NPR News.
Good afternoon from the GBH Radio Newsroom. I'm Henry Santoro. United Airlines is dropping several flights between Logan and Newark in the wake of new federal restrictions on air traffic out of the New Jersey airport. GBH's Jeremy Siegel explains.
The FAA is limiting the number of flights in and out of Newark to 56 per hour. That's in response to major disruptions that have plagued the airport in recent weeks. In light of the announcement, Massport says United Airlines is cutting nearly a dozen flights between Newark and Boston that had been scheduled for this month. Logan has been planning to increase the number of flights to and from Newark for the busy summer travel season. It's unclear if the FAA's cap could lead to those plans being scrapped. Jeremy Siegel, GBH News.
United Airlines did not immediately respond to a request for comment from GBH. Northeastern University just plunked down $33 million for an office building in Burlington, Mass, as the school looks to expand its footprint in that town. Boston Business Journal reports that the purchase gives Northeastern a 4-story, 109,000-square-foot building just over a mile from a cluster of other buildings it has in Burlington. The existing campus includes Northeastern's Costas Research Institute for Homeland Security, as well as innovation and technology labs. In sports, Red Sox Mets wrap up their series tonight at Fenway. Forecast, lots of clouds on tap today, high only in the low 50s, cloudy upper 40s overnight, and lots of rain tomorrow, lots of wind as well, high about 50 degrees. And then the forecast for Memorial Day weekend looks like cloudy as well. This is GBH News.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include Fisher Investments. Fisher's dedicated team of specialists provide resources on investing, retirement income, estate planning, and more. Learn more at FisherInvestments.com. Investing in securities involves the risk of loss.
Welcome to hour number 2 of Boston Public Radio. Jim Browdy and Marjorie Egan. We are broadcasting live from the Boston Public Library. Thank you. And it's streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. At 1 o'clock today, we're going to be joined by the Attorney General of the Commonwealth, Andrea Campbell. She's going to take our questions and yours. And on May 28th, we'll be joined by the Mayor of Boston, Michelle Wu, also taking our questions and yours. Hello again, Jim.
Hello again, Marjorie. You know our next guest from her presidential biographies, among them the Pulitzer Prize-winning No Ordinary Time on Franklin and Eleanor Roosevelt, or a best-selling personal memoir of life with her husband, Dick Goodwin, an unfinished love story, personal history of the 1960s. We'll talk about that again in a minute. Doris Kearns Goodwin, historian, author, and now executive producer of The West, with Kevin Costner, premieres on Memorial Day, I believe. Is that not correct? Yes.
Correct.
Premiering on the History Channel. Here's Costner introducing the series, which goes beyond images of the West portrayed in American movies and lore, I think.
But if we choose to look a little closer, we can see beyond these images to another kind of story. Of people who come to make a home, no matter who's already there. Of a nation that claims an entire continent, no matter what the cost. And of a land that shows us bounty, yet all too often gives us blood. These stories will captivate us, inspire us, and shock us. And that's why we have to tell them. Because though the United States was founded in the East, the country we know today was forged in the West.
So that was Kevin Costner. Here's Kevin Costner with Doris Kearns Goodwin in a rather interesting back and forth. Here it is.
You know, there's people that you meet in your life that you have an immediate connection to. I've experienced that with Doris.
How could I feel otherwise toward him? He loves history, he loves baseball, so he's my perfect man.
That's right. I have a shot.
Joining us now, Kevin Costner's girlfriend, Doris Kearns Goodwin. Doris, it's great to see you.
Doris Kearns Goodwin, do you have anything you'd like to reveal here?
I'll tell you, when you're 82 years old and somebody as dreamy as Kevin Costner keeps calling you his girlfriend, it's pretty amazing.
Oh my God, I know, absolutely amazing. Well, it's a great idea and a great series. So tell us all about what you're doing with Kevin Costner.
Well, what happened is I'd worked with the History Channel for the last 7 years on a series of presidential documents, starting with George Washington and then Lincoln and Teddy and Franklin Roosevelt. And then they came to me and said, could I executive produce with Beth Lasky, my partner, on the history of the West with Kevin? And he turned out to really be involved in it. He understood what he wanted to do was to tell a span of 100 years, from the 1790s to the end of the frontier in the 1890s. But he wanted each story, each hour, to be an individual story, so they'd have a beginning, a middle, and an end. And they'd tell a piece of that 100 hours, and then if you put them together, they'd make the span of the century. So it was real. He knows so much about the West. What happened is when he was 7 years old, he went to a birthday party, and it was How the West Was Won by John Ford.
Yes.
And all the kids went out at intermission. It was 3 hours. He could not leave his seat. He was afraid somebody would take it away. He had seen these unusual people with feathers and blankets, and he wanted to know them, and he wanted to make them his friends. And that began it with Dances and Wolves and Silverado and Wyatt Earp. He knows the West. He feels it in his heart.
So that's his connection. Why'd you decide to do this project?
Well, I decided because I wanted to know more about the West. To be honest, I knew the presidential top-down part of it. I knew that Jefferson had gotten the Louisiana Purchase. I knew that Polk was involved with Manifest Destiny, and we got all those states because of the Mexican-American War. I knew that Lincoln was involved as a person in the 50s when the country is dividing because of the slave states and the free states that are the new Western states, but I didn't know it from the ground up. I honestly think when I've listened now and learned about what it took to go west, this one couple that went right after they were married, it took them 7 months to get from New York to the Oregon Territory. They're in a wagon. They throw the furniture out of the wagon when they have to go upstream. Then they finally throw the wagon away and they have to go on a horse. I would have stayed in New York. I would never have ever left.
Yeah.
And I know that about myself. So I figured I better learn. What was it like? What did these people have to go west when I think I wouldn't have left, even in tenement in New York?
Well, that was one of the great moments in one of the clips I saw where people with the rocking chair, the Argonne Trail kind of strewed with all these people's furniture that they realized they thought they could take with them and then they couldn't. Let's play a little clip. This is another clip that focuses on the Oregon Trail. The pioneer physician, Marcus Whitman, he's talking about the spread of disease to the native Cayuse people.
Then in the fall of 1847, an outbreak of measles tears through the Pacific Northwest. White settlers contract the virus, but many of them have natural resistance. The Cayuse and other Native Americans do not.
Our ways of healing are not working. Dr. Whitman's are not working when they're burying 2, 4, and 6 people a day.
Whitman didn't understand how measles worked. His favorite prescription was to bleed people who were sick, which made them sicker. He didn't really know what else to do.
There's sort of ominous music at the end of that segment, leaving you wondering what happens to the doctor.
You are so right. I mean, what happens is this young couple, the ones that I was talking about, went out with all their furniture leaving and going to the place. And at first they had pretty peaceful relationships with the neighboring tribe. But once that measles set in, they looked to the doctor to solve it. And they thought about the medicine man. If he didn't do it, something would happen to them. So they came into the fort and killed them and killed the people around them. So it's a really sad ending for people who were going there hoping they could bring the Christian religion to the Native Americans. And because of the measles epidemic, that proved impossible.
How is the West taught in our schools? I mean, I don't even know. I have How is it taught?
Well, I think in recent years there's been more scholarship in the schools about the Native American experience. Before that, it was the sheriff and the outlaw and the cowboys, the thing we saw in the movies. And that's what's been so interesting about what Kevin kept arguing about for this. You needed to teach it from a whole bunch of perspectives. You've got these people, the settlers, who are going to have a better life. The same people that came from Europe to America, and then when the East Coast gets crowded, they move further over to the Mississippi. Then when that gets crowded, they move to the Rockies, and they're still searching for a better life. But they're encountering people who've been there for thousands of years, and you get that conflict. Then you've also got these missionary characters that are running west, and then you've got the gold people that are trying to get gold when California comes, and then you've got soldiers after the Civil War, and they all are conflicting with each other, but they all want something, which makes you humanly looking empathetically at them and trying to understand it from their point of view, and that's what we really tried to do.
This is Doris Kearns Goodwin. The series starts on Monday, on Memorial Day. It's called The West, and she and Kevin Costner are the two leaders of this project, and your partner Beth Lasky and a whole bunch of other wonderful people.
Want to hear another quick clip?
Yes.
This is telling the story of Cynthia Ann Parker. This reminded me of one of his movies, right?
Not his, but a famous movie was made of this, yes.
Yeah, okay.
Yes, it does remind you of Dances with Wolves.
Yes, exactly.
Right.
She was involved with a Native American woman, right?
Exactly right.
So anyway, but this one is about this Cynthia Ann Parker, 9 years old when she was captured by the Comanche Empire, and then she was found years later living as a Comanche.
She was covered in buffalo grease, not unlike other Indian women.
She is now called Nadua, which means one who is found or one who keeps the family warm.
She has been married for a number of years to Peytonacona, a chief who was among the Comanches who captured her.
They have 2 sons, Quanah and Pecos, and a daughter by the name of Topsana.
The Indian agent tries to buy back Cynthia Ann, but she refuses to leave.
This was an astounding revelation to people on the frontier. It was shock that she wouldn't return.
They say that she had sort of gone over to the dark side. White civilization freaked out.
And this is a true story.
It's a true story, and that's what you just hope. If you can tell a series of individual stories, then you get to know the West more deeply. What happened with this young girl, she did fall in love with the chief. She did live there, and the Indian agent, when he recognized her through her blue eyes, that's how he knew that it was her.
That's a great
and
scene.
they'd been looking for her for so many years, from 7 to 20 to 33 or 9 to 33. And she didn't want to come back. The Texas Rangers brought her back. So she lived those last years longing to go back to that place. But then the incredible thing is her son, Quanah, not only becomes a chief of the tribe, but he becomes somebody who makes peace with the people around him, and he gets to be friendly with Teddy Roosevelt, and he goes to Teddy Roosevelt's inaugural. He's in the inaugural parade. But what they end it with is saying, and he finally gets buried next to his mother and his little sister, and they say they were separated in life, but they were united in death. So when you can tell a story like that, I think then you can understand the relationship between the tribes and the settlers. Sometimes they could be peaceful, and sometimes something happened.
I wouldn't mention your age, but you just did.
That's okay.
Are you as thrilled as an octogenarian learning new stuff as you were when you were a kid, Doris Kearns Goodwin?
No, it's the best thing in the world. I think the older you get, the more you have to choose subjects you're going to want to learn about, people that you want to work with. You have to be more careful of your time, so you have to choose things. So for me, I just feel like he was my teacher, Kevin Costner, and the whole history of the West as we did it. I've learned something that I didn't ever know before.
You know, the perfect person to ask the question, this is who we asked, about whether or not he was worried about the anti-science, I can't think of a better word than movement in this country, was Anthony Fauci. He was on with us a couple of years ago, and he said he was terrified of it. Are you worried about the the executive order from Trump said to restore truth and sanity to American history and get rid of divisive race-centered ideology? I assume he would call what you described a few minutes ago race-centered, a divisive race-centered ideology. Is there less history interest today in your estimation than there may have been?
I wake up every day worrying about the fact that you keep hearing about history being diminished in high schools, and then you hear about this desire somehow to teach history only from the triumphs, not from the struggles, so that people won't feel bad. They don't want Jim Crow to be taught in places. They don't want slavery to be taught. They're banning books. And the thing is that all of the triumphs come from the struggles. I mean, I think about what happened with Birmingham, Alabama. And when that children's crusade was attacked by the sheriff and the bulldogs were sent after them and the hard pressure hoses, that's what produced the conscience of the country being changed. That's when JFK went forward with the Civil Rights Act. That's what ended eventually through Lyndon Johnson segregation. And similarly, you think of the bridge in Selma. If we can't teach the bridge in Selma and the fact of why were they going to march to Montgomery, because blacks were being denied the right to vote. Is that going to make people sad to know that we once had a time when that happened? No, that should make them feel we overcame that, because that, again, the conscience of the country was fired when they saw that. I was watching that when I was a graduate student. I couldn't believe that was our country when the Alabama troopers went after John Lewis, but yet it produced the Voting Rights Act. So struggle is what produces our greatness. We should be proud of that. We overcome things rather than wanting to say, no, we don't want to look at that.
So again, The West with Kevin Costner, Doris Kearns Goodwin, executive. She's not leaving yet. Don't get all excited. And premieres on Monday on the History Channel. 8 episodes. Am I right about that?
8-hourly
episodes. Okay, she's not leaving because we haven't heard about some very exciting things, including the fact that your wonderful book about your unfinished love story, personal history of the 1960s, is going to be made into a movie.
Yeah,
Give us the details.
Well, it's pretty exciting. It's been bought by Playtones, which is Tom Hanks's company, and Barbara Broccoli, who had been the producer of James Bond. So they're working together on it.
Very impressive.
Who's playing you?
That's the big question. Who's going to
play?
Do
you know?
Well, no.
Do you get to pick?
Well, I hope so. I have some say in it, but there's going to be an older Dick and me. So there's got to be 2 of us going through the boxes, the 300 boxes. So there'll be somebody in their 70s and 80s.
Hello?
All right.
Thank you. Thank you.
So yeah, you could just have more hair on your head and a little more eyebrows.
Yeah, that's right.
Well, that's not coming back. It is what it is. Hey, for those who didn't hear when you were with us and maybe haven't heard interviews about it, we spent a whole segment talking about your beautiful book, and it is a beautiful story in addition to a great history lesson. Spend a minute and tell people.
A lot of people have read it
book.
since it was number 1
well,
on the New York Times bestseller list for quite some time.
That's a wonderful point.
Yeah.
Give a minute on the book if you can.
You know, I'll tell you what mattered so much. It was 7 years ago yesterday that my husband died. And I was so afraid when I started working on this book. We'd worked together to produce a possible book when we found these 300 boxes that he had schlepped around with us for all these years. And he finally decided he'd open them when he turned 80 because he had been so sad about the way the decade ended with Bobby's death and Martin Luther King's death that he didn't want to look back. He wanted to just look forward. And so finally when he turned 80 and he comes down the stairs one day singing and said, "It's time to open, never, never." And we spent the last years of his life going through these boxes, which meant we relived the 60s. But we made a promise to ourselves we would forget what was going to happen later. We would relive Kennedy's years without knowing he's going to be assassinated. Relive LBJ without knowing the Vietnam War would come. Bobby the same way. So once he did that, he got a greater feeling of how extraordinary the decade was and how wonderful it was. And it made him feel that what he had done had made a difference. And there was a serenity in his last days and that I don't think he had had before in his life. So it mattered so much to me.
So would you think less of me if I tell you one of the first things I think about when I think of the book is your husband naked in a pool with LBJ and was it Bill Moyers? Who was the third
Bill Moyers.
Well, all naked in the pool.
Okay.
But it's important because that's where the Great Society comes from. Lyndon Johnson tells them, this is what I want while they're swimming, 3 of them naked in the pool. And they finally pull over to the side, of course.
What a great image.
But you know,
what a great image.
I'm old enough to remember that era too, and I think that's when I think about it, it's one of the things that makes me so sad about what's going on now because it was an era with JFK so hopeful, the young president and his wife and the kids, and then LBJ with all the great society programs and effort to eradicate poverty. It didn't work, obviously, but he tried. The civil rights movements. It's like we were. Obviously Vietnam was a disaster, and we've done many bad things, but there was a sense of we're on the right track. And that kind of came back to a certain degree in the Obama years. And now, I think a lot of Americans, including myself, are feeling ashamed.
I think the most important thing the 60s brought back to me was the memory that you felt you could make a difference. And that's a huge feeling when you're young. When I was at the Civil Rights March when I was 20 years old in 1963, carrying a sign, Catholics, Jews, and Protestants unite for civil rights, I felt transported that I was doing something larger than myself. And when we sung We Shall Overcome at the end and everybody held hands, it was a moment of knowing my life's going to be different as a result of this. I went back to college. I've been majoring in international. I was going to take a Fulbright to go to Paris. And I decided, no, I want to be in America. I want to be part of what's happening in our country. And you want that for young people right now. I think everybody yearns to make a difference in their lives. And people felt that in the 60s. For all the sadness of the 60s, that was the overriding light that shone in that period of time.
Yeah.
So I know historians, particularly legendary historians like you, don't want to make snap judgments, we want to look back, but we're going to talk about current events for a minute with you anyway. One of my greatest fears about this current mess, and it's only 120 days in, is the guardrails that we have historically depended upon, some constitutional, some otherwise, at least in my estimation, are failing. One example that we mention almost every day is the Supreme Court saying that the administration must facilitate, that's their word, the return of Abrego Garcia from El Salvador. Trump says to ABC's Terry Moran, I can do it, and then they totally ignore the Supreme Court's mandate. Am I overreacting to the guardrail issue or no?
Well, I think the greatest guardrail is going to be the citizens. I still believe in that. You look at, when I've talked about this so often, when I think about, it's not the leaders who we have to depend upon, it's us. This is our country, it's our government. And when Lincoln was called a liberator, he said, don't call me that. It was the anti-slavery movement and the Union soldiers that did it all. It's the settlement house people, and there was a gospel of social justice in religion at the turn of the 20th century that gets us out of the industrial areas, exploitation. You had the civil rights movement, the gay rights movement, the women's movement. So right now, it's going to be up to us. I think about Franklin Roosevelt saying that each generation has a rendezvous with destiny. Some are privileged to not have to do something. Some are challenged to call upon. And we've got to depend on younger people. I mean, I'm going to be everything. I'll be marching aside them as an 82-year-old.
Do you see a flicker of that?
I definitely see that. Look, you've seen what's happening in the town halls. You've seen what's happening with people resisting in various places. You've seen people defending government. We now know people who are all fired are often the people in your own community who are doing things that you really care about. The more we get a sense of what's happening and what we value, I think people respond. And that's our ultimate goal.
Can I just ask one follow-up question to that, Marjorie, before you ask something? I brought this up yesterday. I have no idea what we were talking about. Oh, we were talking about a tax on Medicaid.
Right.
Is that people in positions of power who believe in government spend almost none of their time marketing the good that government does until it's under attack, and then you try to defend it after the fact, and then people say we're just doing it because you're trying to protect your little thing. Who of the people who you know well through history was good at telling the people, explaining to the people, educating the people about the value of that which his or her government was providing? I mean,
clearly, even what Lincoln said is government's there to do what you as an individual cannot do, as well as what you can do together as a whole. And then FDR, he came in at his inauguration. The whole first speech was, don't think it's your fault that things have gone bad, that you've lost your job, that there's no safety net, that starving people are wandering the street. It's the failure of leadership of the government was before, and I'm here to provide that leadership. All of a sudden, at the end of that speech, there were headlines, the government still lives, we have a leader. And there was a feeling that somehow this man wrote in that his roof had fallen off and his wife was mad at him and he'd lost his job and his dog had run away. But now everything was all right because Franklin Roosevelt was there. But I think that's a key thing. You've got to keep reminding people why it is that we come together for certain things. Like we care about people who are old. We care about Medicare for them. We care about Medicaid, people who cannot afford to have health care on their own. We care about people who need to be able to have the right to vote. We care about people who should not be living under Jim Crow in the South. As a nation, we care about that, not just the people who are supposedly benefiting from it, but they haven't done a good job. FDR did it. LBJ did it for that short period of time during the 1960s. Obama did it to a certain extent with Obamacare, but we haven't done it since then. And it's the most important story to tell because it's us together. It's not some foreign object. The government is us.
Talking to Doris Kearns Goodwin, obviously.
I also wondered, again, Jim mentioned you like to get perspective when you're a historian, but as long as we got you here, and you spent time at Harvard, and your husband spent time at Harvard, so you're very familiar with the university that is stood up to Trump and paying an enormous price, Harvard and its teaching hospitals. Is Harvard going to make it through this period?
I bet they will. I'm so proud of what they've done. It's so important because, when those first law firms decided to cave in, And then a series of them caved in, and you just worried, oh my God, who's going to stop? And then one of them stops, and then another one stops. And now there's a series of people talking about if you're going to be a young law student coming out, where are you going to want to go? To the ones that caved in or the ones that stood up? And I think the same thing is going to be true with universities. Now, maybe it's given a certain kind of an oomph to other colleges to know what to do and stand up. It's going to be real. The thing that's inexplicable is the scientific stuff that's being undone.
Yeah, the research.
Research is going to be undone that could be for generations. And Harvard's going to use some of its money to do that. I mean, they just found the Magna Carta now. This worth a lot of money.
That's right.
Is that a matter of
sell it immediately.
It's incredible. I mean, for 20, whatever it was, right after the time they bought it, and now it's worth, tens of millions of dollars. So maybe that's a sign of the future.
Yeah.
So, Doris, I asked you this exact same question last time because you are one inspirational character, I should say, in addition to what you do for a living. Is this how you feel, or do you feel an obligation to people who follow you to put up a strong face with hope as part of the equation?
It's a really interesting story because I do know that that's what people expect from me, but then I really do feel it. Sometimes when you say things and you keep saying over and over, we're going to be okay, we have the history. History is what gives me the strength. We've come through these really hard times before, and each time we emerge with greater strength. You look at the Civil War, you look at the Great Depression, you look at World War II in 1940. I mean, that was a much scarier time than now. If Hitler had continued to march through Western Europe, and if England had fallen, and then we might have been next, it could have all been over. And yet we won. The Allies won.
So it's real.
It's very real. It's the only way I can live.
So you wrote a book about Franklin Delano Roosevelt, and I love the place, the arrangement of the bedrooms, who slept where in the White House. I loved all that stuff, all those details. And you talked about the fact, I mean, many other people did too, but you talked extensively about the fact that his disability, his being in a wheelchair, was hidden. A lot of people didn't know about that. So because you were so intimate with them, I wonder what you thought about the Biden administration hiding the degree of lack of acuity, that whatever was wrong with President Biden, he was not what he was. What do you think about that?
I think the whole story is so very, very sad. I mean, even now, knowing that he's got the prostate cancer and the inexplicable understanding that he hadn't had a test since 2014, it's just a sad way for him to leave the presidency right now. You wish that he could have left right after the midterms. The Democrats had done very well. He had said he'd be a transitional president, even without knowing all of this. That was the time when you say, I want a younger generation to take over. I think I've done my job. And I don't know what happens. You get there and you want to stay and you figure I can do even more, perhaps. And I don't understand it.
But a lot of presidents have hidden their problems.
Oh my God!
So he's certainly not the first.
Oh no! I mean, you think
Reagan.
About President Cleveland had an operation in the middle. His jaw was operated on for cancer, and nobody even knew it happened. It was in the summertime, and no, we've seen it over and over again. But it's very important to be able to know the health of our presidents. And I mean, in any other job, you'd have to pass a health exam.
You're right.
And let it be known to the people.
Yeah.
Can we end with the important stuff for a second?
Yes.
Because time's running out. People are posting who should play you in the movie. So
yes.
You want a little guidance from our audience? Let's
I'd
see.
love to.
Joanna says Helen Mirren. What do you think about Helen Mirren?
Oh,
audience?
yes.
Okay, well, that's good. And you're apparently happy. Here would be my choice. Lori Jean is watching on YouTube. Meryl Streep should play Doris. Is that not
the older Doris? I have
obviously.
A good idea for the younger Doris. I think it should be Scarlett Johansson.
Oh, see, the younger one is the one I care even more about.
I think she'd be great.
Some people have said it could be Meryl Streep and her daughter because she's got a daughter.
That's right. She's got a daughter. That's true. That's true.
But think about how great am I going to be with Helen Mirren, by the way? Is that going to be, I mean, think about the possibility. It's going to be incredible.
Well, are we making a deal right now?
We may. I'll call you after the show.
And how about Dick Goodwin? Who should play Dick Goodwin?
Well, that's what we're just talking about.
Yeah.
Hello, thank you.
We know that's
Look
really.
at the look on her face.
That was terrible.
Jim's fondest dream.
Can we put up a little photograph of Kevin Costner and his co-worker, Doris Kearns Goodwin? Do we have that for a second? My goodness.
Oh, my goodness.
Whoa.
He is one handsome man, and you are looking very good with your hand on his torso. Very nice. I think this is a wonderful thing.
Look at Doris.
Oh, my goodness. Look at this. They're in love. They're in love.
By the way, we can't wait. Memorial Day, episode 1 of 8, correct?
2 hours on Memorial Day, then the next day, and then every Monday after that.
Called the West. We can't wait, and we're thrilled to see you as always.
Thank you for doing this, as always. I love you guys.
You just have to make sure, as charming and handsome in person, close up as we think of him on the screen.
Oh, much better.
Okay.
No, he was the greatest guy. I liked him
Just
very
want to
much.
make sure. Just want to make sure. Thank you so much for being with us, Doris.
You're very welcome. Thank you.
We have been speaking with Pulitzer Prize-winning historian and author Doris Kearns Goodwin, executive producer of Kevin Costner's The West, an 8-part docuseries on the History Channel. It's going to premiere Memorial Day, so just a few days away from now, so be sure to check it out. And of course, we're very excited about the fact that her book, An Unfinished Love Story, a personal history of the 60s, is going to be made into a movie. That's going to be a great one. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you very much.
Coming up next is our monthly transit panel with former Assistant Transportation Secretary Chris Dempsey and former State Rep Bill Straus, who used to chair the Joint Committee on Transportation at the State House. We're going to talk about whether bike lanes are going to upend the race for mayor in Boston and what happened to the Fall River line. You are listening to Boston Public Radio 89.7 GBH, live from the Boston Public Library, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News.
Engineers in the U.S. and China are competing to revolutionize the battery technology for electric vehicles.
We can build an amazing battery industry here. We have the opportunity here to really accelerate.
I'm Ari Shapiro. The Great Battery Race and what it means for drivers, companies, and the planet on All Things Considered from NPR News.
Today at 4, here on GBH News 89.7.
Our programs are made possible thanks to you. And MIT Sloan Executive Education, helping professionals empower their careers and explore over 90 courses blending cutting-edge research with real-world application. More at executive.mit.edu. And Mass General Brigham Health Plan, ranked #1 in member satisfaction among commercial health plans in Massachusetts by J.D. Power for the second consecutive year. Details at mgbhp.org/everyday.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Jim Browdy, Marjorie Egan, live at the library, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. The Attorney General will join us at 1 o'clock for an hour of Ask the AG. She'll be here in person. We're joined now, though, at the library by former Assistant Transportation Secretary Chris Dempsey. He now heads the urban planning firm Spec Dempsey. Also joining former State Rep Bill Straus. He was the co-chair of the Joint Committee on Transportation at the State House for years. Chris, Representative, it's great to see you both. Thanks so much for being here.
Okay, we're going to start here with the dreaded local angle. I got to tell you, I've said it a million times, I grew up in Fall River. A lot of my family is still there. People were so excited about being able to take the train from Fall River to Boston, New Bedford from Boston, that real estate's going to go through the roof. This is going to be great. And then, 3 days after it opens, they're having to get buses to transport people to Boston. Let's start with you, Chris Dempsey. And what happened? 30 years in the making, and then it's fallen apart within days.
Well, I'm looking forward to hearing the comments from my partner here, Representative Straus, who, of course, represented the South Coast. And I don't know whether he took the train up today or not for today's visit. We have to ask him that. Excellent. Some adjectives here are disappointing, frustrating, agonizing. This is a community or region that has wanted to have rail service restored for so many decades. And day one is great, and then basically right after that, the trains aren't running. The cause here is a lack of staffing in terms of engineers and conductors on the train. Keolis, which is the private firm that runs the commuter rail system, did not have enough staff in place. They hadn't been training a sufficient number of workers so that when this new service came online, they had the capacity to do that. Again, frustrating, disappointing. If I were someone on the South Coast, I would be furious with this, given that they've been waiting so long.
Well, let's talk to someone on the South Coast. How'd you get here today?
The Green Line, actually.
Okay. So what's your reaction to what Chris Dempsey has to say about this unveiling?
Well, the facts that Chris identifies are correct, but let's add some more. The 2 weekends when shuttle service was provided and trains had to be canceled were weekend service. There's never been a disruption like that on the weekday service. It was a reach to add weekend service so quickly, and as Chris has identified, the staffing levels provided by Keolis, the state contracted operator, were not sufficient. But this is not an equipment issue. Let's remember put this in perspective. when the Green Line extension was finished.
Yeah.
The rails were too narrow.
That was bad.
There was equipment stuff.
Yeah.
This was not equipment. And the staffing has been fixed, I'm told, as recently as this morning, where in the 4 following weekends, there hasn't been a single disruption. So I know it was a dramatic headline from the Globe where they didn't have the guts to put it in as their own headline. They put it in one person's quote that after 2 weeks, South Coast Rail was a failure. The truth is actually much different. It's not a failure. And the traffic is 2 ways. And that's why it's not, we really shouldn't call it commuter rail. It's passenger rail. It's moving people both south and north, which is the long-term vision.
When they printed that quote,
it was
headline,
right after
it was a
it
failure.
happened.
I mean, it was talking about the reality of that moment, not the 4 subsequent weeks.
I always enjoyed this, and maybe Marjorie can help us. Whenever I had a beef about a headline, I'd call up the reporter after, and I'd always be told, "Oh no, that was
the headlines.
The editor."
Yeah,
but can I tell you, my issue here? I'm a big believer in accountability, and we've had this discussion, I would say, for 15 years on this show. I don't know how long has Keolis been the commuter rail?
Seems like forever.
Since it's 10 years.
Okay, since 10 years with Charlie Baker, with
more
other
than 10 years.
Governors.
Yeah.
Okay, it's late. It has initial problems here in terms of staffing. We can go on, and they get the contract again and again and again and again. The penalties, correct me if I'm wrong, are usually minimal. Where's the accountability when their performance is not up to par for the commuter?
I will say this, one of the glaring absences from the original Keolis contract with the Patrick administration was an incentive for collecting fares and to be on top of the ridership. We always ask that be corrected because we've had revisions along the way, but the opportunity is there as we speak in the developing request for proposals for the successor contract. So the RFP is due to come out end of summer, early fall, and the sooner it comes out and the more detailed, the better the public will be served because we'll get real competitive bidding in this place.
One last thing about this. If there's no traffic, you can drive to Fall River in less than an hour.
Well, maybe you can. I can't do that.
Okay, I think at 10 o'clock at night you can.
Okay.
I mean, even going 65 miles
We should
an
say
hour,
he's from Mattapoisett. I don't know if I said that in the introduction.
Yeah.
That's where Representative Straus
right, which is a beautiful place.
Yep.
But it's 90. Is it still 90 minutes?
Yes.
I mean, that's not a great situation, right?
Well, I remember once in one of these interviews, Jim was shocked that I always leave myself 2 to 2.5 hours to drive. So a 90-minute predictable ride where you can be connected to the internet, do nothing, take a nap, and have the prediction for your schedule is a key reason why public transit service is so important to develop and enhance and expand in the Commonwealth. And 90 minutes for the normal drive that people do take from that region of the state, 90 minutes is pretty good.
Okay, that's in heavy traffic.
We got to move on from this.
You just hope that the train could go faster than a car can and without traffic, and that's not
top speed
true.
is 80 miles an hour on this.
You remember when the reporters of the Globe outran the Green Line from BC to downtown?
I do.
Okay, can we move to something? Chris, with you, the feds, I'm still not clear. We know that Sean Duffy, early on after he was sworn in, said you raise your marriage rates and your birth rates and you got more transportation. I'm hoping that was just something to make the boss happy. What's at risk on the transportation front from the federal government?
Any number of projects, dozens and dozens, hundreds of projects across the state are at risk. I was in a meeting just yesterday where city officials from Everett, Somerville, and Chelsea were talking about a project that's at risk, which is the Silver Line Phase 3 extension. Today, the Silver Line comes from South Station, goes out to the airport, and stops in Chelsea. There's a very important proposal to have it extend into downtown Everett, then down south through the lower Broadway district by the casino, all the way to Sullivan Square. That requires some construction, some creation of bus lanes and bus protected facilities. And those are all at risk. A $20 million grant that may never arrive because those funds haven't come. It's just one small example. This is a monumental change and threat compared to how we've worked for decades with the federal government across Republican and Democratic administrations. Traditionally, once even a Republican administration that may not like Massachusetts, once they have awarded a grant, those dollars are going to come. The Trump administration is saying, yeah, we know you have a letter that says you won this, but we're actually not going to give you the money.
Are the Cape Bridges at risk?
Absolutely. Yeah, that's part of
So
it.
you would be dealing this if you had stayed at that job of yours up on Beacon Hill. We talk ad nauseum here with people like Chris and Jim Aloisi and you about T funding. And it seems that at least the House, where you came from, bellied up to the bar in this budget. The Senate less so. We can discuss that if we choose. But I assume what they've got to be doing right now is not only considering adequate funding of the T, but which holes that the federal government is about to create do we fill? What do they do here?
So on the overall funding, what I think you're maybe referring to is there is, as a result of what the voters approved
millionaires tax
2 years ago, well, a little bit more now, the millionaires tax, which is to roughly be applied to both transportation and education. In the first couple of years, the appropriations leaned toward education. In the House budget, the Senate's taking it up this week. In the House budget, they leaned back a little bit more to transportation.
Right, not budget. It's the 1.3 billion.
The Senate, at the moment, has a slightly different approach. But filling the federal holes is almost impossible at the level that the federal government has historically been a partner on these projects. So Chris identified the particular project, a glaring one where the federal grant has already been essentially killed, is the roughly $300 million that the federal government was going to give to the Alston Turnpike and rail project. But I think given the timeline of these mega projects, if I can call them that, it's probably a time to meet those long-time goals to have the state rethink its priorities. I would say, and some disagree, the Cape Bridges, principally at this point, the Sagamore Bridge, is still live. The mega projects coordinator for the Commonwealth, Paiwanski,
former highway commissioner.
Yes, is worked with both administrations of both parties, and I'm still optimistic about that one. There's enough planning and permitting for the next 3 years anyway that these projects can still advance to where we need the major construction money. But short-term grants that supply things year to year, everything is very much at risk.
And these dollars don't come from the sky, right? These dollars are dollars that we contribute as federal taxpayers, whether that's the gas tax or federal income taxes. Massachusetts is already a donor state in that it
Explain
contributes.
what that means. We've talked about that in the past.
So if you look at all of the federal taxes and fees that we pay as a state, individuals, businesses across the board, we give more money to Washington, D.C. than Washington, D.C. sends back to us.
As compared to, for example,
like
Kentucky,
Arkansas,
where Mitch McConnell obviously was the leader in the Senate.
And ironically, it's a lot of the low tax, more conservative states that are the ones that are the recipient states, whereas we're a donor state. I'm not saying that's right or wrong. I'm not trying to start a war over that. But these are not dollars that are, should solely be in the control of the Trump administration because they started as our dollars.
Well, Nancy Gertner, the retired federal judge, longtime attorney, now teaches at Harvard Law School, has argued that we're getting picked on in Massachusetts because we are a blue state and Trump doesn't like us as a blue state, that Arkansas and Kansas or Kentucky or whatever will be rescued, and we won't. You think that's true?
Well, look, I think it's really scary as someone that has lived in Greater Boston my entire life, and over the course of my lifetime, the economy has sort of slowly gotten, and sometimes quickly, gotten better. We've been more optimistic about the future of this region pretty much every year that I've been alive. And all of a sudden, that idea of a growing economy, a thriving place, is at risk. Because we know so much of what has made this economy strong are eds and meds, right? Universities and colleges that win federal grants, that do amazing research, and then incredible healthcare systems that also, again, do their own research, and then the companies and institutions that are formed out of that amazing work. Let's not forget that Greater Boston is one of just a small handful of places in the entire world that solved the COVID crisis through the creation of a vaccine, right? Something we should be enormously proud of. That happened because of that investment. And I do think that we're getting picked on. I do think that Trump is being very explicit and direct when he threatens Harvard, when he pulls back NIH grants. Those are the things that have made Massachusetts such a thriving place, and they may not be there in the future.
So, Bill Straus, we've all read about the Newark nightmare, and there was a piece in the Globe the other day that sort of said, don't worry, Logan's not going to be next. Should we worry if there is disinvestment on the federal level in keeping airports safe?
Two aspects to this. One is Logan as a standalone facility and what the staffing levels are in terms of the FAA providing air traffic controllers, and then the fact that as part of a national, international network, what happens at Logan in terms of flight schedules and things like that depends on deficiencies that may have propped up in other parts of the country. So we're largely out of control of, for instance, I think it was on the news earlier today, United Airlines canceling flights between Logan and Newark, not because of Logan, but because of Newark. So we'll feel the impact, even if it's not a direct safety one. As to safety, I will say this, with Massport over the last 10, 12 years, there have been, based on Massport's own investment, significant technology radar improvements that help the guidance and the safety of the planes that take off and land here. At the moment, the staffing is not as severe. I will say this, staffing shortages within air traffic control workforce have been going on much too long. One of the Biden programs that may or may not survive was a significant multi-billion-dollar commitment to the kind of outdated technologies that some of these stations, some in New Hampshire, some right here in Massachusetts, that's a program that was in progress. So while I know that the National Secretary of Transportation has said, hey, Elon Musk didn't cut any air traffic controllers themselves, they're not the only ones who staff and make that operation go. There's critical support staff, as we can all imagine, to allowing those traffic controllers to sit at their stations and do their job, even when fully employed in terms of the numbers. So at this point, Logan is not directly in trouble on its own, but because we are part of this system, we will be affected.
Talking to Bill Straus, former co-chair of the legislature's Transportation Committee and former Assistant Secretary of Transportation, Chris Dempsey.
So we have a mayor's race in Boston, Josh Kraft and Michelle Wu. There's some other people that are running too, but those are the two major candidates. Do we think that bike lanes is going to be the deciding issue here? Because Kraft is criticizing Wu for maybe not having a master plan or not doing things as fast. What do you think, Chris? Is bike lane going to decide
this? I'm smiling,
this?
Marjorie. It's a little bit surprising that bike lanes have become the number one plank in Josh Kraft's platform. I think there was an interview recently, I want to say it was the Globe, it may have been somewhere else, where he was asked, like, okay, well, beyond the bike lanes, what else are you going to do on transportation? And it was crickets. I mean, he was like, I'm focused on the bike lanes, which have become this boogeyman and apparently the cause of all of our traffic congestion and everything else that ails our city. In contrast, look, Mayor Wu has been a champion on bike lanes, but in the last 4 or 5 months, she's taken a more cautious approach there. And she said, look, I'm going to study what I've implemented and maybe rethink some of the choices that we made. I think that reflects a political reality, and it reflects her willingness to, reconsider some of the decisions, some of the things that she might have pushed. These are, my own personal opinion on this, Marjorie. These are bike lanes that keep me and my family safe. Yep. Now that my daughter is 1 year old,
that's right.
She is now legally able to be on the back of my bicycle, and we have bicycled on this bike lane on Boylston Street, right by the library multiple times. It keeps me safe, it keeps her safe. I think we need more of these, and I do not think that they're the cause of traffic, and I don't think they should be fought over on this mayoral race.
By the way, in fairness to Kraft, just so you know, he says explicitly, he's not against bike lanes. He thinks the plan, as Marjorie said, was not well enough thought out, and there should be a pause. I just want to be clear.
Well, I want to give my take on this.
Yes, please.
As someone who ran for office many times, sometimes the issue is more than just the issue. So this isn't just about bike lanes. There's no question from what I've been reading in terms of Kraft's comments and the mayor and her administration's response, as a candidate, you look for a window into the voters' attention. And sometimes the issue on its own seems trivial. And I don't mean to trivialize bike lanes.
No, I understand.
But what's happening here is he, meaning Kraft, identified an issue that opened a window into, I think, a more subtle attack.
Bike lanes are too woke.
On Mayor Wu, which goes to the way, and I'm not doing a campaign speech here, but it's an attack that seems based on more the way she runs the office of mayor. And that's just the front line that catches people's attention, that if she's that way in the meeting on this, then more and more.
I think you're exactly right.
Yeah, okay. Are we out of time?
Are you biking with your 1-year-old one? Because Chris isn't going to see me on that bike lane. Are you on that bike? Do you bike?
He's
do you
got
cycle
grandkids.
around?
He has grandkids.
Do you cycle
my
around?
daughter's age.
I hike.
You hike?
Yeah.
Okay, well, I won't see you either.
So I
if
stay
that's the
close
case.
to the ground.
Yeah, and I bet your daughter's got an adorable little helmet that she wears in the back.
She has
of
a
the
very
bike.
cute
Yeah.
helmet.
I love the little baby helmets.
We can have a helmet
We got it at
discussion
Dick's
next
Sporting
time.
Goods right here.
All
There
right.
you go.
Chris Dempsey and Bill Straus, great to see you as always. Thanks
Yeah,
so much for your
thank
time.
you so much.
pleasure.
Thank you
It's
so
a
much
pleasure.
for coming in. We've been speaking with former Assistant Transportation Secretary Chris Dempsey, who now heads the urban planning firm Spec Dempsey, and former State Representative Bill Straus, who used to chair the Joint Committee on Transportation at the State House and drives very slowly between Boston and Fall River. That's all I can say. Come up after a quick break. It is time for two more things. You're listening to Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH, live from the BPL and streaming at youtube.com/GBH News.
The American Revolution began 250 years ago, and Massachusetts was at the center of the action. From Boston taverns to Cape Cod harbors and secret operatives in the Berkshires, it took the entire colony to create our Commonwealth.
Over 500 individuals fought and conquered. 24 of them are patriots of color.
We had about 80 men that were called to duty.
Discover the stories at gbh.org/mass250. Support for our programs comes from you.
And Supermicro and NVIDIA, accelerating AI with a wide range of AI servers and the NVIDIA AI Enterprise software platform. Supermicro is committed to driving AI infrastructure breakthroughs with rack-scale innovations. And the Museum of Printing in Haverhill, preserving the history of graphic communication from typewriters and presses to computers and copiers. Their expanded exhibit of rare and historic Bibles is now on view. More at museumofprinting.org.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. I'm Margery and Jim Browdy, live from the library, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. In about 10 minutes, the Attorney General will be here. But it's time first for two more things. And Margery said I should go first to set the stage. This is about as amazing a 40 seconds of back and forth on Capitol Hill as you will ever hear. The witness is the Homeland Security Secretary, Kristi Noem, and the questioner is New Hampshire's Senator Maggie Hassan, and the first voice you'll hear is Hassan asking a very simple question. Here it is.
Well, habeas corpus is a constitutional
That actually
right
is
that the president...
no. We left out. Maggie Hassan's question is, so Secretary Noem, what is habeas corpus? And here's Kristi Noem.
Well, habeas corpus is a constitutional right that the president has to be able to remove people from this country and suspend their right to...
Let me stop you, ma'am.
Suspend their
Habeas
right
corpus, excuse me, that's incorrect.
President
habeas
Lincoln
corpus,
used it.
Excuse me. Habeas corpus is the legal principle that requires that the government provide a public reason for detaining and imprisoning people. If not for that protection, the government could simply arrest people, including American citizens, and hold them indefinitely for no reason. Habeas corpus is the foundational right that separates free societies like America from police states like North Korea.
Now, I would like to say this is the worst thing that happened yesterday on Capitol Hill.
She's the one that's supposed to be in charge of all these deportations.
I'm aware of that.
Yeah, so we have a bunch of things with RFK. I don't know how much time
on this. Wait. But first, this is
It is unbelievable.
It is the right that the president has to deport people?
Well, you know what's weird? Wouldn't you think if you were testifying before Congress, you'd get a few basic facts to make sure you didn't screw it up, or you at least had notes or something like that? She didn't do that. She's the one that shot her puppy, so I think that's the end of the story. And the goat, that's right.
Go ahead.
Then you have RFK Jr., the guy who's in charge of our health care, who thinks maybe we shouldn't, anybody under 65 doesn't really need a COVID vaccine, and maybe he's not too fond of measles vaccines either. Anyway, he either was lying or didn't know what he was talking about. Here's Senator Dick Durbin asking about federal cuts to research, including things like cancer and stuff. This one focuses on ALS. And RFK Jr. says he didn't know anything about that.
How can we possibly give hope to people across the country who are suffering for so many diseases when our government is cutting back on that research?
As I said, Senator, I do not know about any cuts to ALS research, and I'm happy to meet with you.
I just read them to you.
I will have to go and talk with Jay Bhattacharya and find out what the rationale was for those cuts. I just don't know about them until you told me about them at this moment.
And he claimed he didn't know anything about the federal government having blocked billions of dollars in federal child care funding. And he claimed he didn't know anything about this lead paint crisis. Kids are getting poisoned by lead paint in Milwaukee in their schools. And he claimed he had a team.
No. On that, he said there was a team from his department in Milwaukee.
He said
is there a team in Milwaukee?
There is no team.
According to the people of Milwaukee.
And as the senator from there said, there is no staff on the ground, and there is no staff left in the office of the Center for Disease Control because they have all been fired. So either he's lying or he just completely has no idea what's going on in the agency he runs.
Well, he wants to be like Nick, about Christie. No. I mean, it is... I mean, in all seriousness, I know people who are trumped up are going to say, you're just nitpicking, doesn't know what habeas corpus is, either lies or misrepresents what's happening with lead in drinking water in Wisconsin. I mean, it's on and on and on.
Well, they all got trashed. Senator Jackie Rose went after Rubio, who used to be a big fan of USAID, said all these wonderful things about that.
Senator,
She said he was such a disgrace. She didn't know how he could go home to his family at night because he'd thrown all his principles out.
You know what they did
window.
after all the hearings? They had a swig of A1. That was Linda McMahon talking about AI, for those who missed it.
Coming up after the 1 o'clock news, we're going to talk with the Attorney General of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, Andrea Campbell. She's going to join us at the library to take our questions and yours. You're listening to Boston Public Radio 89.7 GBH, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News, and broadcasting live from the Boston Public Library.
Support the news you trust by donating your car, truck, or other used vehicle to our vehicle donation program. You'll have more space in the driveway this spring, and you may earn a tax advantage. Learn more at gbh.org/vehicle donation.
Support for GBH comes from you and Boston Ballet, presenting Romeo et Juliet, a fresh take on Shakespeare's timeless tale with breathtaking choreography and live music by the Boston Ballet Orchestra. Opens May 29th. Official tickets at bostonballet.org. And Newport Mansions, presenting 11 historic properties and landscapes, including 7 National Historic Landmarks, tracing America's architectural development from the colonial era through the Gilded Age. Tickets at newportmansions.org.
You're listening to 89.7 WGBH HD1 Boston. Online at gbhnews.org. GBH News, what matters to you?
I'm Jim Browdy, head on Hour 3 of BPR, live from the Boston Public Library. Until 2, it's the May edition of Ask the AG with Attorney General Andrea Cabral. Most recently, she's been in D.C. making a case to the Supreme Court alongside fellow attorneys general in defense of birthright citizenship under threat from Donald Trump's executive order. We'll ask her about that and a dozen others she's filed in the first months of Trump 2.0, plus ICE's growing presence in Massachusetts.
I'm Marjorie Egan. There's plenty more on the table. Those local ICE arrests Jim mentioned, renter protections, auditing or not, the legislature, and more. Have your own question for the AG? Call or text, or come on down to the library and ask her in person. Let's Ask the Attorney General next. BPR 89.7 GBH, live from the Boston Public Library.
Live from NPR News, I'm Lakshmi Singh. President Trump is hosting South African President Cyril Ramaphosa. A short time ago, when remarks turned to a Q&A with reporters at the White House, Trump was asked why he granted refugee status to a group of white South Africans while the U.S. revoked the protected status of Afghans, Venezuelans, and others.
We have many people that feel they're being persecuted, and they're coming to the United States. So we take from many locations if we feel there's persecution or genocide going on.
Trump's closest advisor, Elon Musk, who is in the room, has also been outspoken about alleged violence against white South African landowners. Musk is a South African native. However, South Africa's Ramaphosa and others have flatly denied Afrikaners are being targeted. He had said that the group that arrived in the U.S. last week does not fit the definition of a refugee. Members of the Freedom Caucus who've been demanding deeper spending cuts in Trump's budget bill are expected at the White House today. NPR's Deirdre Walsh reports the GOP leadership struggled to garner enough votes to get the legislation passed, including Trump's tax cuts.
The tax cuts are really the central plank in the bill. The bill permanently extends the 2017 tax cuts that are going to expire at the end of December. It adds new tax breaks like no tips on overtime, and no tax on tips, things that Trump campaigned on. Those tax breaks expire in 4 years after Trump leaves office.
NPR's Deirdre Walsh. It's a challenging time for the nation's big retailers. Meanwhile, NPR's Scott Horsley reporting on the differing fortunes of two big chains.
Discount retailer Target reported disappointing sales and earnings for the most recent quarter and lowered its forecast for the full year. The chain's become a target for both sides in the culture wars, prompting boycotts. Like other retailers, Target's also wrestling with the rising cost of tariffs. The home improvement chain Lowe's had slightly better news for investors, with profits that outpaced low expectations. Lowe's sales dropped during the quarter, but not as much as had been feared. Scott Horsley, NPR News, Washington.
The EU says it'll review its political and economic agreement with Israel over what it calls a catastrophic situation in Gaza. Here's NPR's Rob Schmitz.
The EU's top diplomat, Kaja Kallas, said the aid Israel has allowed into Gaza is welcomed, but she called it, quote, a drop in the ocean. She says Israel must allow more aid to immediately enter Gaza without obstruction and at a level that is needed. For more than 11 weeks, Israel has blocked aid from entering the Gaza Strip before allowing a small amount in the past few days. The UN warned this week of imminent mass starvation, saying 14,000 babies in Gaza are at risk of dying in the next 2 days. Kallas says because of this, the EU will review the 25-year-old EU-Israel Association Agreement, which oversees both political dialogue and the free exchange of goods.
It's NPR News.
Good afternoon. With the latest from the GBH Newsroom, I'm Henry Santoro. Logan Airport is dropping nearly a dozen flights to Newark Airport. That's as the FAA puts a cap on flights in and out of the New Jersey airport. GBH's Jeremy Siegel explains.
United Airlines usually runs several flights between Boston and Newark International each day, but the FAA is putting strict new limits on flights in and out of Newark amid major delays at the airport caused by tech issues and staffing shortages. With that announcement, United is dropping 10 flights between Newark and Boston that had been scheduled for this month. It's not yet clear if the FAA's cap could upend Logan's plans for more flights to and from Newark for the summer travel season. Jeremy Siegel, GBH News.
United Airlines did not immediately respond to a request for comment from GBH. After extensive debate, the trustees of the libraries of Brookline have voted once again to allow Black Lives Matter and Pride flags to be flown or mounted on its properties. The trustees say the flags will be allowed when related programming is in effect, like Pride Month. Brookline News reports that for several years, a previous library official's policy was to ban the presentation of those flags. In sports, Red Sox and Mets wrap up their series tonight at friendly Fenway. In the forecast, clouds low 50s today, cloudy and upper 40s overnight. If you're going to Fenway tonight, dress like you're going skiing. It's only 51 degrees in Boston right now, cloudy sky. I'm Henry Santoro. This is GBH News.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include Progressive Insurance, where drivers can compare direct rates using Progressive's rate comparison tool. Customers can see options and rates side by side. More at progressive.com or 1-800-PROGRESSIVE.
He is Jim Browdy. I am Marjorie Egan. Welcome to hour number 3 of Boston Public Radio. We are broadcasting live from the Boston Public Library and streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. Hello again, Jim.
Hey, a lot of people are asking if they missed Doris Kearns Goodwin at noon, when will it be up? I think the answer is it's either up now or it'll be up imminently. How soon will Doris Kearns Goodwin be up, Jamie? Oh, now. It's up now. Don't go during the show, but at 2 o'clock, gbhnews.org. In any case, it's time for the May edition of Ask the AG with Massachusetts Attorney General Andrea Joy Campbell. She's here for the rest of the show to take our questions and yours. You can give her a call at 877-301-8970 to ask her a question or make a comment. And if you're here at the library, you can find our colleague Nicole, who would be sitting right there. Go over to her, and as I say, if the question is not wildly out of bounds, there's a really good chance that you'll get to talk directly to the AG. Speaking of, good to see you. How are you?
Doing well. Good to see you.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Wildly out of bounds.
Why, we have a criterion, and that's it. Out of bounds is fine. Wildly is unacceptable. For
No,
us.
delighted to be here with you all.
Well, thank you very much for taking the time to be with us, Attorney General. We really appreciate it. So you had an opportunity to be sitting at the Supreme Court there for the birthright citizenship arguments, which turned into a lot about these nationwide injunction things. But tell us what you thought, what it was like.
First of all, it was amazing, and I had been there mostly as a tourist, right? Even before law school, you go to an institution like that, you take it all in. So to be back there representing Massachusetts, and I always say it's an honor and privilege to be the AG of Massachusetts. I never take that for granted. But sitting, representing our state and Commonwealth in this birthright case, which is a significant one before these justices, I'm still processing the blessing of it, to be candid. And in this particular moment, when everything is on the line in terms of the rule of law and protecting our Constitution, I think the birthright case is such a powerful case to continue to lift up as to why people should care. Not just care about the issue, which is this idea that birthright, if you were born in this country, on American soil, you are a citizen of this country. But the targeting of babies and unborn babies to try to advance some immigration policy is absolutely concerning. It has to do with the 14th Amendment. So if a president thinks that he can dismantle the 14th Amendment or Constitution with the stroke of a pen or a Sharpie, which he cannot do, then he can come for any other amendment. So pick your favorite, the first, the second, or anything else. So we were down there defending the 14th Amendment, unborn babies, but most importantly, the Constitution. And what I actually left the court feeling was not only how historic and what a blessing it was to be there, I actually appreciated the thoughtfulness of every single justice, including those we deemed to be the most conservative justices who were pushing the Department of Justice on this question of whether or not the relief we have won in this case that says the president does not have the power to dismantle birthright citizenship, that relief is afforded to everyone across the country. So we were there on that narrow issue, and everyone asked thoughtful questions of the administration, and they didn't have really good answers, and sometimes actually talked in circles. And I appreciated the thoughtfulness of this court, who I think cares deeply about the rule of law and recognizes if we don't have the rule of law of the Constitution, then this country is something else. We're moving towards fascism, and most importantly, you don't have economy or functioning economy without a Constitution.
We should say you're a plaintiff. The Massachusetts is a plaintiff in the case. You weren't just there as an
we were there
AG
with New
observer.
Jersey, right? New Jersey. Let me mention the other states: New Jersey,
please.
Washington, California. He got stuck on a plane. I don't know what happened there, but there's a coalition of Democratic AGs standing up for this.
We don't care about the other states.
But,
I know.
I know, which is okay, because I love Massachusetts and we're the best state.
But I want to challenge something you said that was actually quite moving. If we don't have the rule of law, well, we don't have the rule of law. We discussed this with Doris Kearns Goodwin. We only said it 1,000 times, so our apologies. Let's just pick one case, as we're going to talk to you about ICE in a second here, Attorney General. The Supreme Court said facilitate the return of Kilmar Abrego Garcia. Trump then says to the reporter, Terry Moran for ABC, yep, I could get him back. He says, I can. And they've done absolutely nothing, as far as the court knows, nothing to comply with a court order. And nothing has happened to them for violating, I would argue, the rule of law from the Supreme Court of the United States. So aren't we in a situation that even if the courts do what you consider to be the right thing, there's a very good chance that it won't mean anything in terms of the president's behavior?
So I'll say a couple of things. I don't think just because this president is operating unlawfully and has a pattern and a pattern of behavior of taking unlawful actions and also not being responsive to all of the orders coming from the courts, that does away with the rule of law. We do have a rule of law in this country. What we have is a president who does not think the rule of law is applicable to him. And so what we're seeing as AGs, and it's not, and not to be political here, but I have to because it's the facts. It's only Democratic AGs across the country standing up for the rule of law and pushing back on this president when he takes unlawful actions that undermine it or look to dismantle that rule of law in this Constitution in this country. And so on the birthright case, for example, you have someone attempting to use an executive order to do away with the Constitution. And we're saying you do not have that power. The Constitution doesn't give it to you. Presidents do have power. Immigration is a big area of federal authority, along with engaging with wars, pardon power. So we're in court consistently protecting the rule of law, but it's a reminder to folks that we are heading in a dangerous direction because our tools within an AG's office are very limited in holding an administration accountable. When we get to a point where folks in this country think, because of their power position, that they are bigger than the law, that they're no longer president, they're a king, then that is out of our realm. That is then now the question for people and for voters, for example. How civically engaged are you? Did you vote? Did you encourage other people to vote? At some point, you have to ask yourself that question too, which of course is beyond the reach of our tools. But I tell my constituents in Massachusetts all the time, I will do everything in my power using the tools that I have to protect our residents here, protect the Constitution, and protect our economy.
We're going to get to your calls in just a minute, by the way.
But you know what I wonder, Attorney General Campbell, why doesn't one of these judges hold these people in the Trump administration in contempt of court? I mean, because they're just, especially with Abrego Garcia, who's been in prison for all this time against what the Supreme Court said. Shouldn't that happen?
I think the courts need to maximize their tools in this moment in time, and maybe even at times take a few risks, because why the hell not?
Yeah.
And why I say that is, in our office, when we were filing our NIH lawsuits, we filed the first one to protect the critical funding, billions of dollars in biomedical research, clinical trials, life-saving treatment that the president attempted to wipe out on a Friday night. We ran into court to say, you cannot do that. This is clinical trials for pediatric cancer, for example. This is resources that protect our economy because of our healthcare institutions here and biomedical innovation. And we won that case, and then we went into court the second time on NIH 2 because they were playing games, canceling grant meetings, but still having the same impact. And some AGs didn't join our case like they did NIH 1 because they weren't willing to take that risk. And I said, well, actually, we're pushing the law a little bit, but I actually think we have strong arguments here based on the action of this administration to try to cut funding on NIH. So we're taking some risk and we're pushing the envelope. Everyone needs to do that in this moment in time in response to the unprecedented actions we're seeing from this administration.
So but haven't they canceled a lot of this funding? It's gone, a lot of the NIH,
much of
funding.
In the context of so many of our federal funding lawsuits, we are actually winning. The faucets of funding have not turned off.
They have not turned off.
They have not. And actually, in our NIH cases, we have, in our first one in particular, the money is continuing to flow. We turned it back on. That being said, I do operate in reality, and the reality is when they made that decision on a Friday night to cancel funding, that then affects clinical trials, for example. So you had some folks across the country literally driving hours to go to a clinical trial only to learn that it was canceled. And of course, we then are in court to try to get the courts to keep up, to maintain access to those trials. But if you know anything about clinical trials, for example, you miss one, it's not like you can make up that clinical trial to then get back on your care that you hope will save your loved one's life. So these decisions by the federal government are certainly having an impact, not only creating fear in community, costing potentially lives of our constituents, absolutely undermining our economy, and maybe even moving us toward a recession. That reality is real, but this is why I show up in the office every day as AG to do my part, to fight back against what we're seeing.
Okay, so we had a bunch of questions about ICE's presence in the state, but our first caller has a ICE-related question. So let's start with her, and then we'll do follow-up. Melanie from Newburyport, you're on with the Attorney General, Andrea Joy Campbell. Hey there, Melanie. How are you?
Hi, thank you. Thank you for taking my call.
Thank you.
My question is about Massachusetts laws governing the practice of ICE and DHS officers being unmasked and unbadged and driving unmarked vehicles. I think it puts all of us at risk for abuse and escalation, even our own law enforcement. Our law enforcement don't wear masks. They have badges. They even have name badges. And FBI agents typically don't wear masks during raids. So I'm just wondering if it's legal here and could it be banned?
Great question, Melanie.
It's a great question. And I actually appreciate, Melanie, your frame, because what we're seeing from ICE enforcement right now in Massachusetts is creating fear and not advancing public safety. And it's not just ICE officials. Now you have other non-ICE federal agencies, FBI and other agencies, showing up to do aggressive enforcement here in Massachusetts, in stark contrast of our law enforcement. So I have a state police division within my own office where we are out there taking on all types of cases to remove drugs off the street, guns off the street. We do it in such a way that we not only follow the law, but they make themselves, if they're not undercover, obviously, known to the public, and they do it with the highest of exceptionalism and integrity. We're not seeing that. And so a couple of points on this. Where we are fighting back, one is for due process, and Rumesa's story is a good one.
Ozturk from
Somerville,
Sword,
intimately, I talked to her recently.
Oh, you did?
She's incredible. She is absolutely incredible, given what happened to her, but in addition that she still has legal proceedings ahead of her. The grace that she has, the spirit she has is remarkable. But we were involved in that early on. Did not mince my words, and in a statement I put out, just immediately saying this is unacceptable. And frankly, now there will be more incidents. We probably can't even keep up if we were to put a statement out. So we're taking action to protect due process, supporting her lawyers. We're also making sure if something horrific happens to someone, that lawyers are available for these folks, immigration lawyers. And frankly, a call to action right now, we need more lawyers to step up. In addition, when we show up on the 14th Amendment issue, it's obviously protecting unborn babies and babies in this immigration enforcement effort by the administration. But what I want folks to know is while we will do our part, it's still very hard to hold the federal administration and ICE officials accountable for the activity we are currently seeing in Massachusetts. They are patrolling our streets. They are at times unmasked. They do not necessarily identify themselves, which makes our jobs in the AG's office, but also law enforcement harder. Why? The authority of the federal government when it comes to crafting immigration policy and implementing it is extremely strong. It is unprecedented, actually, for a state to hold ICE accountable for actions that they are doing while advancing, from their perspective, immigration policy and immigration efforts. It has to be something so egregious, possibly. That being said, it's not off the table for us to hold ICE accountable, but let me tell you, it is absolutely ridiculously hard to be able to do that given the authority they have, the supremacy clause in this country, and the significant authority ICE has, including being able to engage and pick someone up off the street without a warrant.
That's what I want to ask you about.
Yeah. So
on that
point, we're outside the warrant. What I am doing, and I'm pushing my team, where we hope to have someone make something by the end of this week, early next week, is we've put out a lot of guidance to institutions about how to protect the privacy of folks, their information, but also if ICE shows up at a healthcare facility, we've put out guidance, find it on our website, Mass AGO, guidance to institutions on how to engage with ICE. The thing we need to do now is put out information to the public on what they should expect or not expect from when ICE is patrolling our communities, what is lawful and what isn't. Because they will be shocked to see the significant authority that ICE has, including patrolling our communities based on this concerted effort by the federal administration, which we know is doing nothing whatsoever to advance public safety, but creating fear and putting people into hiding, including the very people we sometimes depend upon to actually take cases on, to advance cases in order to protect folks in our communities.
Yeah, one more question on this, then we'll get back to your calls. We're talking to the Attorney General, obviously. It seems to me, and there may be exceptions to this, that what we as a society and government does is when an abomination is perpetrated by Tom Homan or his people, we respond to it, whether it's Ozturk or Khalil or mass deportation. But there's almost no preemptive legal strategy. And let me suggest one, if I may. Marjorie and I we're laboring on under a misconception about warrants. We have said on the air, and we were wrong apparently, that if you want to grab someone out of their house, you need a warrant from a judge. If you want to grab someone off the street, you don't need a warrant. Well, it turns out we're wrong, and you know this, we didn't know this. Under the Immigration and Naturalization Act, you need an administrative warrant, meaning given by a federal agency, not a judge, even if you want to grab somebody off the street, unless you can make a case that they're likely to escape before you get the warrant. Well, my understanding is they never have an administrative warrant. So why aren't we able to, almost never, why aren't we able to get in court and get some injunctive relief that mandates in advance that if there's no administrative warrant and they can't make a showing that that person was likely to escape, that they've committed a wrongful act and should be held accountable by a court. Do you understand my question,
I
Liz?
absolutely understand your question,
So
and I
what's the
absolutely
answer?
agree with you. We can't always just be reactive.
Exactly.
We have to be proactive. I agree with you. But what I want folks to understand, including listeners, the federal authorities when it comes to immigration enforcement, is the scale is stacked against us. So say we do that, we go in and say administrative warrant, which they don't always have to have. They could say, well, they will go back. Based on even what we're seeing now, they don't give a damn about administrative warrant. They don't care. What we're seeing from the posture of folks showing up in our community right now, they don't care. And guess what? Even if we were to hold them accountable post getting that order, you get an administrative warrant. We go back into court to say, well, this ICE agent didn't have one. Good luck. Good luck trying to hold them accountable, not just because of the supremacy clause, but also because, well, to your point, they were trying to escape. They were doing X, Y, and Z. And then it gets even worse for us as a state to try to continue to think about holding them accountable. It's not off the table, and I'm not saying it is.
But you seem to be saying...
I'm not saying it is. But
you seem to be saying, as your Attorney General, please, I know you'll correct me if I'm wrong, I care deeply about you. I'm going to do my damnedest to protect you, but the reality is, based upon the state of the law, I can't do much up front except educate you as to what your rights are.
So right now, the question that is in our communities that I welcome is how the hell do we hold ICE accountable for what we're seeing on our streets?
What's the
Whether
answer?
in Worcester
What's the
or
answer?
other places.
How do we hold them
It is
accountable?
very difficult to hold them accountable. Why is that? Because the federal authority and laws that give them such power, they have tremendous power to enforce immigration law. So you almost have to see something so egregious to possibly hold ICE accountable. And why is this? Even for principles like qualified immunity. I was going and doing it in the line of my official capacity. It might be easier to hold ICE accountable if they, for example, I'm sitting at a bar having a beer, because why not? Every once in a while you need one, especially in this time. I'll digress. But, I'm sitting there catching up with constituents. An ICE official comes in off duty and then starts to do something, harassing folks, doing something outside of their official duty. That's a lot easier to hold them accountable. It's much more difficult. So this is where I say we will do our part, but other people can do their part. Law enforcement, local law enforcement, has discretion. I was pleased to hear the Worcester chief say, we're not pursuing any charges against that young person.
A 16-year-old.
Looking at the totality of what happened and saying, I feel bad for that person. Yes, right? Discretion, we can use that. At the same time, I can put out this guidance because guess what? To your point, people go out thinking people not only have to have a warrant, but that they have to engage a certain way. Sorry, that's just not the case. And I think that information is critical because it then defines for all of us, given what we're seeing, what our expectation is and just how hard it is in the immigration context. And so when I say we're going to do our part maximally, we will. But we also engage with judges and courts all the time. We see what they're prone to support on and what they're not. You just saw the Supreme Court in this Venezuelan TPS or
temporary protected status.
TPS status case. The Supreme Court did not have to insert itself at all in that question. It was working its way through the courts. The lower court in California made a decision. The appeals court made one. The Trump administration didn't like it. They went to the Supreme Court. Then you have the Supreme Court inserting itself in ways it didn't. So you don't even know what you're going to get from the courts. But let me tell you, at least based on the history of precedent, the Constitution in this country, it gives significant power to the president. And that's when people need to wake up. Because at the end of the day, my last point on this, he's there because people voted for him to be there, whether we like it or not. And so the question becomes, for those who don't like what they're seeing in their community right now, did you vote? Did you encourage others not to vote? And do you realize now that who's in a White House matters? He could, for example, working with us to bring down pricing, or working with Walmart to bring down pricing for goods. But he's not doing that. Instead, we're seeing this aggressive posture on immigration. So I just have to leave people with that point because I think it's important, because it doesn't just put it all on one AG. It puts on all of us to say there's a part we can play in determining what we're seeing in our community.
But just one thing that I'm confused about before we leave this: the Supreme Court is upholding due process. They've not said we can do away with due process. So isn't that an area where when people are hauled off, like Ramesa Ostark hauled off the street without due process, they've said you can't do that.
And we're fighting for due process. My office, have filed briefings in support of due process and the administration following due process in other cases involving immigration, even in court with a lawsuit to protect status of TPS, et cetera. We're doing our part. But this is what the Supreme Court did, not fully doing their part. They said, return the gentleman, but didn't give him any instructions. They could have, but they didn't, because they're playing cute, right? They could have said, bring this gentleman back today via a plane, been really specific. But you have some folks playing politics, including on our Supreme Court. I can't discount that. Even though I thought they were thoughtful in the birthright case, you still see the political leanings of certain justices showing up, or even no explanation as to why they're making decisions. The court can do more, and it should do more. I can't control that. So the question that we all have is, what can each of us do? To your point, you even educating folks right now using this platform on what ICE can and can't do. So we're going to do what we can, but even then, I don't like to just do things knowing we'll get an outcome that is a temporary fix and solution to the problems we're seeing. I'm thinking outside the box, and I need some time, given what we're seeing from ICE and figuring out how we can reply within the confines of the law.
Let's go to Kevin and Lowell. You've been very patient. You're next on with the Attorney General. Hi, Kevin.
Hey, thanks for taking my call. Thank you, Attorney General.
Thank you, Kevin.
Nice to speak with you. I'm enrolled in the social equity program, and I've been involved in cannabis advocacy going back.
He's involved in the social equity program of the... continue for a second. Let's hear if the Attorney General can hear you. If not, we'll put you on hold and get back to you after the break to see if we can have a better connection. Continue, Kevin.
Sure. I'm enrolled in the Cannabis Control Commission social equity program.
Okay.
And I've also been involved in advocacy for going back to the medical program. I know that the CCC has a number of issues they need to work through, but I'm really concerned about discussions about potentially removing the independence of the CCC and moving it under a constitutional officer, especially given how the rollout of the medical marijuana program went back when it was under the governor. I was curious if you support preserving the independence of the Cannabis Control Commission.
Kevin, thanks for the call.
Thank you, Kevin, for the call. Well, right now we're in the weeds here, and I'm not going to sugarcoat that there's some reforms that need to be done, and we've been advocating with my joint appointment authorities and others in the legislature on ways to improve this commission. And frankly, even folks who are participating in that social equity program who came to us with concerns around some notice issues on the program that we were able to work with team members on to cure, to provide, make sure there was more transparency. So it's not a question I can answer by myself. I think I'm engaging with a lot of stakeholders who have different thoughts and opinions. But one thing we have to do is get them the staff they need, get them the human capital they need, so that they can deliver to folks. And so, Kevin, if you actually want to stay on and engage a little bit more, because we have been in the weeds on this as a policy question, we're happy to actually get more from you and go from there.
Kevin, don't hang up. A producer will get your contact info and give it to the Attorney General. Before we take a break, can we do some good news?
That would
the
be nice.
We
Yes.
trash the legislature
I would love some good
all
news.
the time. They did the right thing. I know where you were on this eviction legislation.
Awesome.
We talked with Andrea Cabral about this years ago. Governor Patrick did something with Corey records, criminal records, to ensure that these don't follow people for the rest of their lives. What happened on the eviction front, if you can?
So right now, you can get your eviction record sealed in Massachusetts. And I got to give a shout out to Senator Literate Edwards, who played a critical role on this, Rep. Moran as well, all of the advocates. And so in this state, sadly, and I'll just give one example for the sake of time, as soon as an eviction is filed against you, you have an eviction record. Even if you win that case later, you still have it on your record. So we saw the impact of folks trying to build their wealth, get into housing, because of a flawed, inaccurate record. So now you can petition the court, go through a process that we want to make as easy as possible to have that sealed. And so many organizations are involved. We continue to put our information on our website, too, to help folks. So if anyone thinks they're interested or need this process, reach out to us.
Well, let me just say one thing before we take the break. It's not just people who are not at fault and wrongly sued.
Absolutely.
Even if you're found to be at fault, there are rules in place. There's a longer waiting period so you can have it expunged as long as you don't do the same thing again. So there's a lot of protection for people, and they should. Is it on your website?
So you can go on Mass AGO, yes. There's also, and I'll get this after the break.
Okay.
It's a sealing like actual website, which I will
let's
get.
do that.
So I'll get that for after the
Great.
break for people to go to walk through that process.
Great.
We're talking with the Attorney General of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, Andrea Campbell. She's going to stay with us to the top of the hour. We're going to take a quick break. If you want to call or text, 877-301-8970 is the phone number. You're listening to Boston Public Radio, broadcasting live from the Boston Public Library and streaming at youtube.com/GBH News.
House Republicans are working hard to advance President Trump's big, beautiful bill that extends tax cuts for big corporations and cuts spending on social programs. I'm Arun Roth. Today on GBH's All Things Considered, Congresswoman Ayanna Pressley joins us to explain why she thinks the bill is an attack on working people. That and all the day's news starting at 4 on GBH 89.7.
Our programs are made possible thanks to you. And Bridgewater State University, helping create jobs for Massachusetts and working to connect industry leaders to graduates, elevating business in Boston and beyond. bridgew.edu/elevate. And the Boston Symphony Orchestra, announcing the 2025 season of Tanglewood, showcasing the beauty of incredible surroundings and world-class music. Tanglewood, where music goes for the summer. Tanglewood.org.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Mark Regan, Jim Browdy, live at the library, streaming youtube.com/GBH News. The Attorney General has been with us since 1. She'll be with us till 2. If you have a question or a comment, give her a buzz, 877-301-8970. You have the website on the eviction thing.
Yes,
What
and
is
how
it?
do you forget this? Sealmyeviction.org.
Sealmyeviction.org.
Right to the point.
And so great legal information
Great.
out there, and folks can follow with them, but of course our office as well.
Even if you lost your case, check out that website. Yep.
Absolutely,
Yep.
absolutely.
You know, we get this question all the time since you're the Attorney General, law enforcement person here running the whole show in the Commonwealth. We'll ask you. There's a lot of misunderstanding about whether...
Now that I'm no longer in the weeds,
That's right.
in the
No longer
weeds
in
on
the
the
weeds.
Cannabis Commission.
That's right. About the constitutional rights that people have who are non-citizens. Mm-hmm. Tell us about what they're entitled to.
Well,
People think they're entitled to nothing, basically.
No, that's not true.
Yeah.
That's not true, and every state is different in certain expansion of rights, whether it's free tuition or certain things that we're affording folks. But they're trying to use this sort of argument in the 14th Amendment case, saying, well, they're here not, I put this in quotes, subject to the jurisdiction of us. And we say that is total nonsense. They are subject to the jurisdiction of us, and it's been around for over 150 years. You're here in Massachusetts, you still have to follow the laws, et cetera, which we were actually seeing from immigrants, including those that are undocumented, who were going to work, who were paying taxes, and so even the false narrative that suggests they are not is ridiculous. And then those who are committing crimes, our office does criminal liability.
Right.
So whether you are a citizen or not, if you are perpetuating crime in Massachusetts, we hold you accountable. And that may mean you are deported if you're not here lawfully. That may mean if you're a citizen here, you are incarcerated. We are doing that every day while not creating fear in our communities, which is in stark contrast of what we're seeing from ICE and the federal administration.
But like a Marisa Osterk would have, she can
They have
express
free
her-
speech rights. They have due process rights.
Exactly. Free speech,
Absolutely.
due process, all
and if
those
she committed
things.
a crime, we'd be picking her up and holding her accountable
So
for
she's
that.
entitled to write
That's
her
right.
piece supporting Gazans and people in Palestine in this war without being deported. Okay.
Let's go to Mike in Jamaica Plain. You're on with the Attorney General, Andrea Campbell. Hi.
Hello, yes, thank you for taking my call.
Sure.
I did have a comment, a quick question just based on what the Attorney General just said. What right do we have to defend ourselves if someone tries to seize us on the street without a badge? But my comment was about the audit and Governor Healy and the recent immigration fiasco, where she was blaming immigrants for lack of resources, when we now know, thanks to the audit, that she was misspending millions of dollars. So we need an audit. We voted for it. The time has come. As far as I'm concerned, she's as corrupt as Trump is, and we just don't know.
By the way, the audit that you're talking about has nothing to do with question one. It was about shelter contracts
And I would say
that sort of
that's
thing.
a question for the governor on that audit. I haven't even seen it fully. It just came out. That's a question for
How
the
about,
governor.
the ability
and I
to
think
protect-
the governor is going to be on here at some point.
She is.
I
She's
think
always
corrupt as Trump may have been a little of extreme.
Well, that's for he's entitled to say what he wants. How about his first question? What right do you have to protect yourself or to act if I assume he meant if an ICE agent comes after you?
And it's difficult. That's why people, rightfully so, including myself, are so angry by what we're seeing in our communities.
Yeah.
And this idea that they are saying we are here putting out press releases included saying we're promoting public safety. They are not. They're promoting fear and lawlessness and jeopardizing even what Melanie said, I'm going back to her name, the law enforcement that are trying to do the right thing here, even though they can't. They're not ICE, right? Trying to also, of course, protect people. Very difficult what they're doing in our communities right now.
Okay, so what Mike conflated was the audit that was came out today or yesterday, I guess, and a topic I know you love discussing with us, which we
Still
discuss
waiting on
every
the
month.
auditor.
Well, here's where I am confused. We asked the auditor to release her correspondence with you, and she said it was an attorney-client privilege, and we said to her, well, you can waive the attorney-client privilege since you're it. She did. She sent us 150 pages of stuff. You keep saying to us, I need to know what she wants to audit. Is that not what you say until
That's
I know
one
that?
thing.
Okay, well, let me tell you. Here's her letter to your office on February 27th. The title is, What's the Scope of the Audit that the OSA intends to perform? The scope of the OSA's current audit of the General Court legislature.
No. First of all, when is it? The date of that?
February 27th.
Of this year?
Yeah.
Is that the last correspondence
I don't know if it's
from
the last
our
correspondence.
office to her office?
I don't know what it is. Well, no, it's from her. It's from your office, right? And this is about.
No, not the. Is it the last?
She is
one?
okay. Forget that. Okay, here's what I want to say. She has laid out, according to our reading of the 150 pages, specific areas that she wants to audit. Not what she might audit in the future, but what she wants to audit now. Here's my question that I still don't understand. Why can't you make a determination based upon what she says she wants to audit now is either constitutional or not? And if you rule that it's constitutional, in the future, if she goes too far, you can rule that request is unconstitutional and she's not entitled to it.
That's not a ruling we make. So we made this, we actually put out correspondence, I included, and others, I think, added additional commentary outside of the AGO, before the ballot question on whether or not she had the authority to audit the legislature. We made it clear then she does not, if she, as envisioned then, was going to take that audit into certain places. You do not. And we made it also clear, yes, you can proceed with a ballot question, but the challenge with the ballot question is It does not require a constitutional analysis before you put it
Understood.
to voters, which is ridiculous. It makes no sense. You're asking people to vote, and you haven't decided whether it's constitutional or not. Now she wants us to go into court and to defend her against the legislature, saying that the audit she wants to do is constitutional.
Yeah.
I cannot bring myself into court to do that if we do not know the fullest scope of the audit she wants to perform.
So the fullest scope meaning that she
times.
ever may want to audit?
Absolutely.
Why?
Because there are certain places that are unconstitutional, and until she says, for example, I agree with you, this is unconstitutional, this is unconstitutional, the court's going to ask the same question.
Okay, so let me, one more question on this.
I have to add one more thing,
Sure.
because we have put out correspondence too. And if you look at our last correspondence, because it does not always mean that you're getting a full picture, because in addition to the correspondence, we have met with her team over and over and over again.
Okay.
And my last point on this, and why I say last is because the last I checked, the biggest question I'm getting right now is on ICE, not the audit.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to say that in a way that discounts the ballot. I want to enforce
72% of the
that.
people, including
I agree,
you,
but that
voted
was
for
before
it.
ICE was patrolling our streets.
Well, you can do two
right?
things at once, right?
Absolutely.
Okay.
But I'm just saying that I've said the same thing on this radio show.
Okay, I want to clarify one thing. I'm sorry. This is really important. I want to make sure that you agree with this. If you thought that any audit by the auditor of the legislature was unconstitutional, you could make that decision now. You don't need to see the details. But it seems to me
some audits are constitutional and some are not.
Some are. So,
and we've made that clear to the auditor. We made it before the ballot question.
So why don't you just tell her what she's allowed to audit under the Constitution and what she can't?
Because guess what? I'm not the auditor. When I represent every state agency in this state, that's my job. They come to me and say, I would like you to represent me, including the governor or anyone else, to represent me in a matter. I then ask them the questions the court would say. Great, thank you. What relief, for example, are you asking from the court? No, let me finish, Jim.
I'm sorry.
What relief are you asking from the court? What decision do you want? What law do you want us to enforce?
Okay.
We ask tough questions. We do not represent everyone all the time. And the same is true here. I can't put myself in her shoes. She has every right, given the authority of her office, to say, I want to audit the legislature. Great. Depending on the scope of that audit, it can be constitutional or not.
So you don't want to know the scope now. You're saying, and then we'll move on, you're saying I need to know the potential full scope that she may ever audit before I make a determination. Is that what you're saying?
Because the court will ask, what's the scope of it?
And so
I'll end with this. The last correspondence we sent was just that, in a very loving way. I don't want to suggest just because me and you are going back and forth that it's like, no, it's not personal. It's not personal. It is, this is what the court would ask us when we go in. And, for example, if in our conversations with the team and the auditor in correspondence, it is different. On the one hand, you're saying, I want to audit this, and then it's something else or something else. We need a full picture of that so when we go into court. And we've made that clear from the very beginning.
Susan from Dorchester, you're on with the Attorney General. Welcome.
Susan from where?
Dorchester.
Oh, wonderful. Hi, Susan.
Hi, how are you? Thank you so much for returning my call.
Thank you.
Returning your call.
Returning your call. You called us.
I love that. And I love that you're from Dorchester. Go ahead, Susan. Go. Go, Susan, go.
I love being from Dorchester. My question is this. We filed a complaint with your office a few months ago regarding Sunrun Solar.
Oh, yes.
And I haven't heard back from your office. We're having a lot of problems with Sunrun. They put us into a collection agency saying that we owe $5,800. We've been in touch with them, and we have not heard anything back. We've been asking for an itemized account of the money that we owe, and we haven't heard anything from them.
Before Susan, before she answers,
if there's any other kind of recourse that we could have
don't go away.
Regarding Sunrun.
Sunrun, by the way, is a solar company, and in addition to what the Attorney General says, we had Jen McKim on a couple of weeks ago, did brilliant reporting here at GBH on the nightmare that is Sunrun for some. So Attorney General, go. Oh, and don't hang up, Susan. We're going to get your contact info.
So yes, Susan, please stay on because yours is specific, and we have heard from many others.
Great.
And we have been successful in some instances in getting folks their money back, restitution, et cetera. So please stay on, and we're actively looking at Sunrun.
I believe.
Well, explain. So that's all you can say is that you're okay.
I believe
based on the complaints, we're reviewing those complaints, and the fact that it's from more than one person. Obviously, we have to really look at that.
Susan, we're going to get your contact info. A producer will, and we'll give it to the AG. So please hang on. I'm sorry.
Nicole, I think we have someone at the library wants to speak from the BPL microphone. Wants to ask a question. Oh, here he is. This is Sean. Hi, Sean.
Hi,
Hello,
Sean.
Hi, Attorney General. Hi, Jim.
What's your last name, Sean?
Hood.
I know.
Oh, you know Sean?
I know his dad.
Okay. Hello, Sean Hood.
Good
nice
to
to
see
see
you.
you.
Is this a plant question here?
No, not at all.
Go ahead,
it's great
Sean.
he's here.
Okay.
He's his own person.
Exactly.
Okay.
My question is, are there any concerns in regard to in regard to book banning during the Trump administration?
Absolutely. And I actually appreciate you lifting it up, because I was just at a conference in Falmouth yesterday with librarians. And it was packed. Hundreds of librarians from, I think, every municipality in the Commonwealth. And we have an active lawsuit that we have already won, pushing back on the administration they tried to cut funding to libraries and other nonprofit institutions. I mean, think about it. Your local library, they're trying to defund. We won that case, and so it's still moving through the courts, but we won it where they had to turn that funding back onto libraries. But the question I got from the librarians is, why should people be so concerned? The value of these public institutions in giving us information freely, right? Not banning books, not censorship. Censorship should not show up in a democratic society. It shows up in other countries, right? And as soon as you have someone, or the history, Nazism, for example, they went after the press, the lawyers, they took away the books, etc. So when I say we're heading in a dangerous direction, this is one example of the conduct by this administration in looking to eliminate maybe libraries, ban books, censorship, even remove someone like a Maya Angelou from the Library of Congress or other places that everyone should be concerned about, because you suddenly are moving away from a society that is based on democratic principles and one that's based on fascism or something else, which is scary.
Sean, good to meet you.
Thank you. Good to see you.
Speaking of lawsuits, you were together with a bunch of other attorney generals at the IBEW local in Dorchester.
Local 103.
Yeah, you were talking about a lot of lawsuits there. What was the takeaway from that evening?
That it is the Democratic AGs that are literally on the front lines fighting back and looking to hold this administration accountable. It is not other elected officials. The most powerful role right now in holding this administration accountable to the rule of law, access to federal funding, access to jobs, protecting the Constitution, protecting our residents, holding them accountable for all types of aggression in various communities. It is the attorneys general from across the country. And it is only the Democratic AGs across this country.
Yeah.
And so I was proud to host our New England AGs, so AG Clark from Vermont, AG Nerona from Rhode Island, AG Tong from Connecticut, AG Fry from Maine, to talk about the collective work we're doing to hold this administration accountable. And I will add, it's not like we just wake up going to hold this person accountable. We would love to have worked with the federal administration, have partnership. We then are still continuing our work to fill the void. Our consumer protection cases have expanded. Elders are still being defrauded. Someone has to hold them accountable. The federal administration's not doing that. Environmental work that we're doing.
The offshore wind.
Offshore wind. You talk about Sunrun. Sunrun, the person who is harmed by Sunrun, the Consumer Protection Bureau that used to be at the federal level, you can't go there anymore. You have to come to your AG. So we're also filling the void on other issues, including housing. So we're doing both, and we just lifted up that work that it's multi-state. It's not just Massachusetts, but I've been stressing Massachusetts, we may be small, we're not New York or California, but we punch above our weight. And even at that town hall and everywhere I go, I feel like a Muhammad Ali, because we're punching above our weight, leading the way and leading the charge in many ways to protect our people.
You know, one of the ways New England is not leading, and I just learned this a few weeks ago, I did a conference on this, actually with the head of your children's justice.
I thought we were having good news to the end of this.
This is fairly good, I think. Liza Hirsch, by the way, was fabulous. She
thank you
Yeah,
for
she was really
lifting
good.
her
It works
up.
for you. Yeah, she was
She
great.
runs our children's justice
And we were
unit.
talking about the Study Act, which you filed. And the reason that I brought it up in terms of the New England thing, I was stunned. There are 8 or 9 states that have some limitation on cell phone use in schools. And I know the Study Act goes
Yeah.
further. You will tell us this in a second. None of those states, much to my amazement, are in New England.
That's right.
New York is just in the process of maybe doing something. Explain to people, in a compact fashion, what does the Study Act do, including this bell-to-bell cell phone prohibition?
It's designed to create the most positive, non-disrupted learning environments in our schools for our students, our teachers, and anyone in this realm, K through 12. And it says a few things. One is it complements our active litigation against Meta, Instagram, social media companies, and says we recognize litigation can take a long time. So we can still hold them accountable with a legislative fix. So, for example, you want to keep these platforms safe. Well, does your age verification work? We can hold them accountable. The consistent and infinite scrolling, we can hold them accountable to say you have to redesign the app. So redesign these apps to be safe for our children and not put that onus on parents. It also says bell-to-bell ban on cell phones so that you can't access these apps. Why? Because we're seeing an uptick. Bullying, harassment, often used by these apps in distracting our kids and expecting teachers to enforce it and be enforcement police. They cannot. This is why they're fully supportive of this bill. And then lastly, it also says we're also going to help provide you either with some resources. We want to be partners in this because we're asking the school districts to develop a curriculum on the positive and the cons of social media use.
That's great, actually.
And so it's a comprehensive bill, and I would encourage every parent, even young person, to pay attention to the Study Act, to connect with their local elected official on it. And this is actually something positive we can do while the federal government is not supporting us on taking on social media companies for the adverse effect they're having on the mental health of our kids.
And this is a bill that you and a rep and a senator filed that's pending before the legislature.
That's right.
So people know. The Study Act is the name.
That's
Roger from New Hampshire. Is it Stratham, New Hampshire?
Stratham?
Stratham?
Stratham. Yeah.
Hey,
Stratham,
Roger,
New
what's
Hampshire.
up?
Thank you for calling,
You know
Roger.
she's the Attorney General of Massachusetts, right?
I do know your AG.
Okay.
AG
Even though he doesn't show up at meetings. Go ahead, Roger.
And well, I'm Commonwealth curious as well. So,
I'm sorry, what?
my question, Commonwealth curious, and my daughter lives in Dorchester.
That's good enough.
okay, that's good enough.
So,
You can stay on
And
then.
what's her name, Roger?
Jackie.
Tell her I
Jackie.
said hello.
Okay.
Hello, Jackie. Go ahead, Roger.
On Draper Street.
Good.
Oh, I know Draper
We'll
Street.
visit her after
That's
the
my
show.
former
Go ahead.
council district.
Okay.
Go ahead.
There you go. Well, I want to congratulate you for working to hold fossil fuel companies accountable for public deception and under the Consumer Protection Act.
Yep.
A story in the New York Times indicated that the Justice Department wants to throw sand in those gears. Are these state lawsuits, and there are 30 states and municipalities and counties holding, suing fossil fuel companies.
That's a great
Many
question.
of these are staying in the state courts, but are these lawsuits vulnerable now because of the Trump administration?
Well, you don't know. I will say we're going to do everything in our power to continue to fill the void where they're either walking away or absent, including on our environmental cases. So whether it's our case against Exxon or other work we've done even with other states, we will continue that work. And so we're reminding folks while we're holding them accountable, our cases in this lane, not just Exxon, even our work around PFAS and other areas where we're actually on PFAS, I was with your AG in New Hampshire talking about a collective effort. I think it's more difficult now for him given the position and posture of the federal administration, but we're going to continue that work. And our constituents need to know that we're going to fill those voids. That work doesn't go away. If anything, it's going to expand. And we also see this work as a consumer protection case. We mentioned Sunrun, which obviously is in the realm of our environmental portfolio when you have a constituent complaint come to us like that. So we're going to keep fighting the fight. We'll attach more resources if we need to, more human capital, and see if we can even get additional support from lawyers in Massachusetts to be a part of this work as they think about ways they can step up to support the AGO.
Roger, tell Jackie the
In
Attorney
Dorchester,
General will be
I
at
know.
her house this afternoon
On
by
Draper
3
Street.
o'clock.
I love that.
Roger, thanks for
Thank
the call.
you.
We
You
appreciate
know,
it.
we were talking at the beginning of the show about artificial intelligence and people's concerns about it, and I was mentioning that the so-called big beautiful bill that the president's trying to get through Congress talks about prohibiting states from regulating artificial intelligence. Where do you fit in on artificial intelligence?
It's a great question. So a couple of things. So it actually picks up on Roger's point, where the federal government is either stepping away or trying to undermine our environmental cases, which are on strong footing in state court. And we don't think there'll be federal interference, so we'll keep fighting. The same is true on artificial intelligence. They are nowhere to be found in supporting us in, one, lifting up, yes, there's benefits to AI. We all use it every day. But it also can lead to discrimination. It could lead to certain outcomes. Some people don't even know they're engaging with AI because there's no requirement that you be transparent. So we put out guidance, I want to say last year, some time ago, before this administration, making it crystal clear that our state data privacy laws, our consumer protection laws, our discrimination laws apply to AI just like they do a human being. And this advisory was welcomed by other AGs in other parts of the country as they were looking to make that clear. And we have very aggressive consumer protection laws here. So when we see this provision in the House bill, along with other provisions that are concerning, we immediately reach out to our federal delegation. We tell them to push back, of course, work with others. I think there may be some Republicans who are also not for this because it interferes with their state laws and holding AI technology and those vendors accountable. So we're going to keep pushing so that this doesn't make it forward or get passed, so that our state laws are still applicable as defined by our office to AI and AI, everything having to do with AI.
Attorney General, it's nice to see you.
It's great to see you
so
all.
much
Thank
for
you
being
for
here.
having me.
Thank you very much for
Attorney
being
General
here.
Commonwealth.
We very appreciate it. We have been speaking with the Attorney General of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, and we are very grateful, as always, for her time. And we thank you for coming in today, AG, and thank you for listening to another edition of Boston Public Radio. Thank you to people that came down to the Boston Public Library. Keep up with us 24/7 by way of our podcast, or check out our TikTok page. That's where they had me banging into the glass window. We were going to show you those pictures before, but if you really want to see them, you can see me banging into the window up there over and over and over again. Tomorrow, we're going to be joined by political analyst Chuck Todd, former Massachusetts Public Safety Secretary Andrea Cabral. We're going to have a music panel with Berkeley's Emmett G. Price III, GBH's James Bennett II, and CRB's Brian McCreath I, plus another author interview with the great Patrick Radden Keefe. He wrote about opioid addiction, and he wrote about this great thing about Say Nothing About Ireland, about
and
the
it's a
troubles.
fabulous television series now.
It's
It's
fabulous.
brilliant.
Yeah, that's right. And so is Empire of Pain, which is also a great television series off his book.
Do you want to feel better for a second?
Sure.
Politico, breaking news. Trump administration deportation flight to South Sudan violated court order, and the judge says that administration officials may have committed criminal contempt. So maybe a judge will act.
Well, gee, maybe we could hold someone in criminal contempt. That would make me so happy.
Sorry, you were thanking people.
I say I want to thank our crew, Zoe Matthews, Aidan Conlon, Nicole Garcia, Hannah Loss, our engineer, John LeClaw Parker, our executive producer, Jane Bologna. Special thanks to BPL staff, Patrick Lally, Colin Cockrell, Juan Jose Cadena, our host of the Newsfeed Cafe, and across the street at the Lenox Hotel. I want to mention the Culture Show is on right after us. We didn't get to talk to Jared, but he's going to be joined by the great Washington Post art critic Sebastian Smee, a Pulitzer Prize winner, and great shark scientist Greg Scommel on 50 years of Jaws. It was made in 1975. He's going to talk about that. That's right after us. I'm Marjorie Egan.
I'm Jim Browdy.
Thanks again for tuning in today. I hope you can tune in tomorrow and have a lovely afternoon.
WCRB-FM 99.5 HD1 Lowell, Boston. WGBH-FM HD2 Boston. WCAI-FM HD2 Woods Hole. WJMF-FM HD1 Smithfield, Providence. And at classical.org.
Going to get to Haydn's 87th Symphony in just a couple minutes. After Red Priest,